Welcome back to another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. This is episode 41, and we're talking about illusion of choice versus player choice. This was one that was suggested by one of our listeners.
Yes, it was his choice.
Oh, was it?
We
Yeah,
shall see.
yes, indeed. So, how's your week been, man? You're still sounding it out, right?
Sounded out so hard.
Just rolling around your own filth.
It has been great. We have had 70 degrees all week long, beautiful
Ugh,
weather,
ugh,
and I've
gross,
been
dude.
doing my
It's been
reading.
much nicer here. It's like probably 93, 94, and
Okay.
but it's nice because the humidity is literally 100%.
Okay, so basically you have to have gills to go outside?
Yeah, it's like sitting in the sauna, so that's nice. I don't ever have to go to a sauna. You do.
I know.
And
I was just
what
sitting there
else?
the other day in my perfect weather thinking, I wish I could go to a sauna right now, but it's so inconvenient. If only the sauna
Yeah.
would come to me.
Right, exactly. And your windows are probably all open and sunshine coming in. Gross.
It's true. Have not used my air conditioning yet this summer.
See? And that's another advantage of me is I use mine all the time. Plus, no real sunlight ever gets in because it's so hot that it makes our house hot. So I never have to see any of that unsightly dust, stuff like that that you see when you actually open the windows.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah, that
it's
makes
another
sense.
benefit.
So
Plus,
basically, Mississippi equals greater than Colorado.
yeah, yeah, and plus, one more thing is if you like swimming, there are puddles everywhere here, so that's also nice.
We have a pool here, but it's just not been warm enough to really merit it yet, which is sad. I'm like, I wish it was unbearably hot so I would have to get in the pool to survive.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Plus, I mean, it's really only pools or like pools for your feet, so your feet stay cool, but not really actually because it's murky and boggy. So,
That's good. You can
yeah,
culture some delicious foot fungus that way.
exactly, and it's the perfect breeding ground for those of us who like nature. It's a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes.
Hmm.
So we are doing our part here, getting those mosquitoes out because there are thousands of them.
I have yet to see a mosquito here in Colorado, but maybe I can bring some back with me when I go to visit.
Yep, and ticks.
Start?
We got all those.
Can I start? I'll start a colony.
Sure. See, that's the thing about Mississippi. We're known for giving of ourselves,
Giving malaria.
and also taking all of the funding, because we are the lowest in gross domestic product out of our state.
But you do lead the country in teen pregnancies and adults who believe angels are real.
Yep, and illiteracy. So we do
So,
have things we contribute.
yeah, it balances out.
Yep, that's good. Oh, and welfare per capita. We actually don't even make enough money in Mississippi to be a state. We actually have to borrow from the federal government every year. It's nice. It's real nice because that way we're at the top of the headlines. Is all I'm saying. People know who we are.
But when we look at pictures of Mississippi, you're also obese and prosperous looking.
Right? Exactly. We're eating all the food. Well, because it's free. And we don't have jobs. We just sit around on our butts and take in welfare. So
Mm.
it's really nice. It's really nice. But
So, how has your week been in that paradise that is Mississippi?
you said paradise. I lost it for a second. Yeah, it's been really good actually. It's been really good. I got a lot of work done, and also my wife got strep throat, which is horrible. We
Oh,
just can't.
awesome.
I'll stray away from the health related talk this time since I did last week. But yeah,
It
it's
seems that your house is an epicenter for pestilence.
it's gross, man. Like here's the problem: my kids. Anytime you move from out of state and then you get around kids from that state, your kids are gonna get sick, right?
Mm.
So that happened, and
Yeah.
so that's been like a slow journey. My son got mono when he first got here because it's such a gross state. Like they didn't. That's not even. That shouldn't even happen. He's a kid. Anyway, yeah. So that's fun. Also, Amy, my wife, works at like community mental health right now, and so you can imagine the kind of wonderful things she's exposed to there. And she
Lots of
goes to
hygiene.
schools, multiple schools, and schools are just little cesspools. So we like to get sick here. We like to get sick as much as we can.
Nice.
So that's fun. But other than that, no, I've done pretty well. Got a chance to play some games, which I was really excited about. And other than that, just played a lot of taking care of the wife.
I think the
A lot of
last
work.
time I was sick was February when I was coming back from Rome and I got all those weird European germs.
Oof,
So
gross.
I can relate to that.
Gross. Well,
Hmm.
sorry
Well,
about that.
yeah. Should we go into our recent news?
Recent news. Okay, there's been a lot in the headlines. So we're gonna have to go pretty quick, I think.
Hmm.
But okay, I'll kick it off. First of all, one I actually posted to the Facebook page, which was it's called Classcraft. It's a classroom as an RPG.
Tell me
So
more. I'm interested in such things.
yes, yes. So there's this teacher. He's a young guy. He's also a coder. I believe he's a programmer. And so he was thinking, how can I like get these kids more engaged? Like the lecture style. You can speak more on this, but my limited knowledge is that the lecture style is something that has been called into question recently because it's just complete. It's an artifact. It's something that is abstracted from regular learning, and then you have to unabstract that to actually put it into action. So basically, you abstract to a sitting in a chair and then taking a test on some knowledge, and then so you extrapolate to that, then you interpolate back and have to use those skills in a job setting. Why not just cut the chase is what I hear. But this guy had a different idea. He said, no, we can still work with this lecture thing. We'll make it like an RPG so that when you come to class, you kind of get some experience points and you can unlock skills and things. And you, what else? Okay, complete assignments. Basically, all the win conditions of going to school.
Hmm.
He
Turn them
turned
into quests.
yeah, and experience points. And you have little parties. So like whoever's in your party, I think, is it the whole class or just part of the class? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Party? Oh no, I think it was I think it was parties within one class. There was multiple ones and they would compete. So it's pretty cool. Different classes you can be, like the wizards and the warriors and the mages. So very cool.
Yeah, sounds interesting. I know that the they model teaching as far as like the most retention, the least retention, and like the least retention was passive lecturing, like just sitting there and people talking to you, and the most retention actually comes from when the students are teaching the subject to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if that plays an element, like maybe there's a quest where you have to explain how to conjugate ER verbs or something to your party members.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. Yeah. But that's exciting. I like this because being a guy who's interested in learning and teaching and disseminating information, this is pretty cool. I like this, and I like that he did a Kickstarter for it and everything, and I think it had already made its goal within like a day or something.
So if you want to check that out, it's on Kickstarter. It's called Classcraft.
Classcraft, yeah.
Yes. Well, also in the news, what is the hands-down best part of the Halo franchise?
There are no best parts. Next question.
What is
No,
the least awful part of the Halo franchise?
Okay. Graphics are dumb. The mechanics dumb. Probably either the multiplayer or the soundtrack.
The soundtrack, yeah. Well, they've managed to ruin that. Bungie fired their composer, the guy that did the Halo theme, the da 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 ba 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 ba, like the iconic Halo theme. He got fired. But not only did he get fired, it was like in a horrible way where he had all this vacation time built up, like unpaid, paid leave, sabbatical time, sick leave. He had it all saved up. Like he was coming in every day, putting in his hours. Then they fired him, and they wouldn't give him all the benefits that he had accrued.
Wow.
He's actually suing Bungie over this. So yeah, we'll be seeing that going to court soon, probably.
Wow.
Yeah,
What a bunch of bastards.
Fired in April, and yeah, there's a big lawsuit about it now. He says on his Twitter, he says he was axed without cause.
Wow.
So,
outstanding.
Good job, Bungie.
Some more class from their side of things.
Mm-hmm. Keeping it classy.
Well, that's fun. So there's another small bit of news. The largest gaming collection, it won a Guinness Book of World Records. It's up for sale right now. So if we want to, just as the Game Theory podcast community, pool our money together and invest in a worthy cause, you could do it on charity, or we could get the greatest gaming collection ever.
Yes. In fact, it even comes with a Guinness Book of World Records certificate where you become the new record holder for that. So you can actually have a certificate on your wall. It'll be like Jeremiah Bean. Like picture this 10 years from now. Jeremiah Bean, PhD. It's got your little diploma. And then like largely overshadowing it next to the wall. Largest gaming collection in the world.
That'd be awesome. I'd have all those video games that could have probably went to feed people. But F that, man.
People
this is capitalism.
Don't eat video games.
Exactly. That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. So.
How stupid of me. So it's pretty exciting. So, and if anyone's rich out there and wants to buy it, you heard it here first, guys. Grab it.
So in cultural awareness news. They have a thing called Japan Expo in Paris. It's like a big cosplay, anime, and gaming event.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Riot Games was in attendance, right? You know, Riot Games, maker of League of Legends.
Hmm.
Well, for their announcement that they were going to be at the expo, they created a special flyer that has the character Ari, who is like the kitsune looking, like with the lots of tails, and
Mm.
kind of like schoolgirl. I don't know. It's League of Legends, but she's there right next to Japan Expo with the Rising Sun flag, and the problem with that is that Ari is wearing a traditional Korean costume called the hanbok, and she's kind of like the official Korean character. Like she debuted when the game launched in South Korea. Koreans like kind of think of her as like the Korean character in the game.
Uh,
And they put her right next to the Japan Expo, next to the Rising Sun flag, where if you know your history of Asia, the Rising Sun was the imperialist Japanese flag that they used to rape, murder, and pillage their way across Asia. So it's not a very well-liked emblem for Koreans.
yes, the rising sun is actually has multiple meanings. It's true.
Yes.
They raise their sons in other countries by impregnating their women. That's not true. I'm just making that up.
Okay.
But yeah, that's pretty bad. So they got upset?
Yeah, they were a little offended. They complained, and France was like, "Oh well, whatevs. It's all Asian." But then eventually they changed their mind, and apologized, and they replaced her with a more Japanese-looking character. That samurai guy. What's his face?
Master Yin or Yi? Yeah.
No, he's like Yasuo. I forget. He's like the guy. He's like a new champion. He's like got a big ponytail, and he's got wind flowing through his hair. I think
Okay.
it's Yasui or Yasuo. I forget his name.
That's
But
cool.
yeah, they eventually apologized. They're like, "Oh, sorry." Like basically, what happened was whoever was in charge of putting that up there was just like, "I don't know, Asia's Asia. She looks kind of Asian. Let's put her on there," and it upset a lot of Koreans, which are a majority of the fan base for League of Legends. So you don't really want to upset them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad they replaced it with an airbender. That's good. Um, yeah, that's fun. Also, in the news, I put this on the Twitter. The Twitter? Is that how you even say that? I'm so inept at
The
social.
Twitterverse, I think.
Twitterverse, there we go. I put it out to the Twitterverse that Obama got busted because he got a free copy of Witcher 2 because I believe it was Sweden? Switzerland? Sweden? I think it's Sweden.
Sweden.
I believe it's Sweden, yeah. The company who makes Witcher actually resides there, and it's one of their big contributions to popular culture
To
and
the
mass
world.
media. To the world, exactly. So when Obama went there, he got a free copy, and then this time when he came back, they were kind of like, "Hey, how'd it go?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm not very good at The Witcher." So, like, he just kind of fudged. But
See, that's the problem with Obama. Like he's wasting all his time trying to stop global warming when he should be gaming. Where are his
exactly.
priorities?
That's what I'm saying, man. That's what I always get in fights with my advisor for the same reason. He's like, "You should be getting your PhD." I was like, "No, thank you. I'll be gaming."
It's
But
like Frank Underwood. He has time to game, and he's a vice president.
exactly, yeah. And he has time to just do horrible things. That
Horrible.
whole horrible things made me very uncomfortable that season.
So this is kind of exciting, especially with our topic about free will. Are you familiar with the Turing test?
Touring. Hmm. Doesn't come to mind. It sounds familiar though.
Yeah, you'll probably recognize it when I explain. The Turing test was invented by a computer AI guy,
Uh-huh.
Alexander Turing. And basically, what it is his definition for a computer having intelligence. Instead of artificial intelligence being actually thought of as like an intelligent being, a sentient, if you will,
Right.
was if it could fool at least 30% of human interrogators in a 5-minute conversation,
Oh, no,
then
I'm
it could
not
be thought
familiar.
of as intelligent or thought of as thinking.
Uh-oh.
Well, we've had our first computer program able to do that.
That's not good.
Yeah, a Russian team uh, create a little boy a program that poses as a young Ukrainian boy, and they made him about 13. So it was somebody who would thinks he knows everything, but if you question him on it, he might not. So that's kind of how they explained like some of his
Mhm.
questions where he didn't know the answers to.
Got it.
But he was able to fool 33% of judges in at a test in the Royal Society in London.
Wow. That's Skynet. So careful.
Yeah, well, they're more concerned about the implications for computer safety as far as like hacking and piracy now.
Hmm.
As we get these like thinking programs,
I
it's a
see.
bit of a
Okay.
wake-up call. So we have computers that can now trick people into thinking they're humans.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. No, it's not outstanding. That makes me nervous, but that's fine. It's kind of like that. So what's it called? Cleverbot online. It's probably not gonna pass the Turing test, but it's pretty sweet if you guys look it up. Clever. I think it's called Cleverbot. Just cleverbot.com, pretty sure. And you go there and you can ask anything. Just say something like, "Hey, how are you?" And it says, "Pretty good, you." And then because it has a bunch of scripts and possibilities, it's pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, so that's fun. So I have a little piece of news as well. Twitch TV, which we've talked about here, and is actually, I think we mentioned last time in the news that their YouTube was trying to buy them out, right? Google.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, they're kind of a big deal. Well, they put out a study to try to figure out about study. It's not a study; it's a survey. They don't know what they're doing, but they just asked a bunch of questions of people and said, "Oh, here we go. Let me get some characteristics of gamers." Well, as it turns out, people who identified as gamers was how did they define that term? It was like within the
People
last
who played within the last 60 days, I think.
60 days. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people who
that's the
played
name.
some kind of video game within
Gamer
60,
is
last
almost
60 days.
as amorphous as violent video game, quote unquote. Like no one knows how to measure that, or there's no consistency at least.
Hmm.
Lots of people think they know how to measure it. Same thing with gamers. Like we're not really sure. So anyway, yeah, but they found a couple cool things, like some cool characteristics of gamers. One of which was that they're like just overall, you could just generally say they're better like family men, and they care about their community more, which is pretty
Yeah,
exciting. Like, what's that?
pro-social.
Pro social, man. Yeah. So just to read some characteristics of the survey, it was 1,227 people from the U.S. Between the ages of 13 and 64, and 63% of those were gamers. You can do the math. 37% was non-gamers, and they compared those two groups, and they found that like people were more likely to be engaging with their friends and with their family, and considered higher more important than non-gamers. And in fact, one of the questions that you pointed out, which I thought was hilarious in our pregame talk, was there was a specific question that was here it is, quote unquote, having a positive impact on society is important to me. So
Yeah,
gamers, like you'd think that would be about the same, right?
right. Like it seems like that should be something at least on a survey. Like that might not be true, but you would at least say so, right?
Yeah, exactly. Self-report, exactly. You would expect to be inflated, but at least be there. So if I was to make a guess before I saw these numbers, and somebody said, what do you think this is? Is this gonna be a discriminatory item for gamers and non-gamers? I'd say, nah. I mean, I imagine most people are about the same. Maybe gamers a little bit higher because of the fact that like we do games a lot of times consist of you protecting a society or people around you and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't guess very much, and I would guess somewhere around the 80 to 90% for both. Well, I wasn't far off actually. For the majority of gamers, it's 76% agreed with that, which is still kind of low. Like, because that means that 24% were like, nah,
Society.
yeah, having a positive impact on society is not important to me. I don't really care.
It's kind of like,
Which
are you a misanthrope? Yes or no?
exactly. Well, non-gamers you'd think would be not far off, maybe a little lower. Well, it was actually 21 percentage points lower, with only 56% of them agreeing with the statement. 56, that's barely half. That's like for every one non-gamer, there was a non-gamer right next to him going, "You do? Oh, I don't. I don't really know. I don't like that."
Yeah, some of them weren't surprising. Like, I'm a natural leader. A lot of gamers like to be like the raid leaders and take charge. Like they consider themselves like. And again, this is self-report, so this is like how people view themselves.
Ah,
So gamers, 61% claim to be natural leaders, while only 35% of non-gamers are natural leaders.
huh.
Um,
Leaders.
but this one I found was surprising. So gaming,
Mhm.
spending time with my family is a top priority. Now, if you're a gamer, let's say you're a dad and you've got kids, but you also have a new game like Castlevania 2. Which is
Just
your top
hypothetical.
priority?
Just hypothetical.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's my kids, and but I do try to find time. Like I'm like, hey, you guys want to watch a show? Maybe have a little more screen time today than usual because I want to play Castlevania.
Right. Well, 82% of gamers were in that where they were like, well, my kids are my top priority, but I like to game. And then 68% of non-gamers were like, my family, meh. 68% of them say spending time with their family is their top priority.
I wonder what the reasoning behind that was. Like, first of all, this is kind of a suspicious sample. This is pretty weird. I mean, there's a weird findings. I mean, I trust data over my. Well, this isn't really data, but close data. Because I say it's not. I don't know what the methodology was, and I suspect that if it's done by someone like this, usually these things are pretty bad. Because like Walmart puts stuff out like this sometimes, stuff like, and it's usually pretty bad. You're like, wait, what? You can't say that. But for this, I wonder if it wasn't just the fact that like people who are returning the surveys and are identifying as gamers, and people who are returning the surveys and not identifying as gamers, and they're watching Twitch TV. That's weird, right? That's a weird sample. That's not exactly what
I
you
wonder
call.
how they distributed the survey.
Yeah, well, they have surveys on Twitch all the time. You can click. So it's probably something like that. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, whatever it is. It does not say, but it's still suspicious. Like I would look at that sample and say, what the fuck is going on here? So,
or some stuff seems less surprising. Like gamers tend to be more educated, more likely to hold a college degree, and their parents are more likely to have college degrees. I think that's an economic thing.
And that's consistent with the literature too. Yeah. Like some of these other ones, I would not have predicted. Having read almost everything out there for gaming, I would not have predicted some of these, which is not a good sign for this study. Whereas that's pretty well known. We have higher incomes typically, which is a matter of the fact that a lot of the consoles are getting more expensive, that kind of thing.
Right.
But also of the fact that we're also more intelligent on average and more healthy, and there's a lot of things that you would not suspect that is actually true that they found.
More likely to be employed full time.
Yeah. More likely to have lower blood pressure is actually one that they found in the literature for gamers.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
I guess it depends on what you're playing. If you're playing League of Legends a lot, that might not be.
Yeah. I guess it's resting blood pressure. Probably not while you're playing the game, but.
Have you heard the book Everything Bad is Good for You?
No.
It actually came out in 2005, and it was it kind of put forth the argument that a lot of things the media thinks are bad for you, like television and video games, are actually pretty good for you. And so some of this data was in that book as well.
That's good. Oh, that's good. I feel like I'm constantly finding the myth. People say things like it's rotting your brain. I'm like, okay, and I never know if I should be the actually guy.
Yeah.
But I almost always am in that scenario. I'm always like, I'm sure you guys are being tongue in cheek, but that's actually opposite of true. Even some iota, even one iota of what you're kind of hint at is completely unsubstantiated. So I don't say it like that because they probably think I sound like a douche. But I say it like, well, actually, I study this stuff and it's actually really good for you. There's just make sure you're also doing the other good things.
But I think this is I like where this is going. It seems like the media is kind of changing the way they perceive gamers. Like, if you look in the 80s and 90s, like gamers were like those socially inept loners living in their basements. Or if you watch like, I guess some modern, like Big Bang Theory still portrays that myth, but a lot of modern portrayals of gamers are just like, oh yeah, people game. Like Frank Underwood, like this powerful politician's got a PlayStation 2 in his room and he plays it when he wants to let off some steam.
Yeah, and okay, so actually the guy, you remember Jamie Madigan from our show, friend of the show? Now he put up a thing about advertising to gamers now could go horribly wrong, and one funny way they do that is like Doritos and Mountain Dew, right? Is the idea that's what gamers eat and drink.
Yeah.
There's two things going on there. One, that like you said is sort of a dated thing of like when only like lonely fat people in their basement would do that. Not that there's anything with lonely people or fat people, but that's the idea you get in your head, right?
Right.
This thing that pops up. And number two, a lot of that comes from the fact that, okay, gaming, you don't know a gamer unless they're gaming, right? Just out in public. I'm not going to sit next to someone on the subway. If they don't have a shirt or something to identify them, I can't tell. It's not like a race or something that's salient, So the only time you really identify a gamer usually is if they're wearing something maybe, which was much less popular back then. Now it's a little more popular. But or they were gaming. Well, when they're gaming, of course they're eating like junk food. That's kind of the thing, right? It's like going to a cookout at a tailgate party and saying, "Oh, football fans are always eating nachos."
Yeah, people who watch movies love popcorn.
They eat popcorn all the time. They probably have huge sodium and ate way too many carbs. No, I mean it's just something you do while you play. So there's two things going on there. I think they're a little absurd, but that's okay. A little defensive about gamers. So I feel like I'm fighting with people a lot, even really smart people.
It's your tribe. You gotta be defensive about them. That's how
Them's my people, man. Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows people that fit that stereotype, but everyone knows people that fit the football stereotype too. But not all people are like that. So.
Right. So if you guys want to see this study, survey. If you want to see the survey results that Twitch published, look up the new face of gamers and Twitch on Google, and it'll come up.
Yeah, one benefit that like private type things like this has is the bad part is that it's usually shite methodology, but the good part is it's got really nice graphic design. It's really well laid out.
Yeah, that's true. Ironically enough, we were just talking about how gamers prioritize family time. Just got a message from one of our Star Wars group that he can't play tonight because he needs to spend more time with his family this weekend.
No, see, he's got it all wrong.
Yep, he's got those priorities all turned around.
Yeah. Oh well. I don't really care about having a positive impact on society,
Meh, society.
56% said yes. That means 54 said no. I'm kind of curious about how they do their data imputation, which is basically like what happens when you like have a non-answer or weird answers, because you usually have validity things in there, like things like I eat every marshmallow I see or something like that for like a measure for kids. And if they say yes, well, okay, not everyone I see, that would be stupid because yeah, they probably do. But like something like one says I drink 9 glasses of milk a day. And if the kid says yes, we think okay, so that's something that indicates that they could have been zoning out a little bit, at least on this item, if not on the whole thing. So validity comes into question. Well, they probably don't have that on this, and so there's probably people just zooming through because like something pops up on their Twitch thing, if that's how it happened or whatever. So you always have to be able to look at those kind of things.
Yeah, but I mean, still, 44% of people saying that they don't. Yeah, it's
44. I think I said 54. Math is hard.
Math is hard.
I just taught math.
You teach statistics.
Yeah.
Like that's literally knowing percentages.
Everyone makes errors, man. Like
that's true. Anyway. All right, so another news item. This one's not really a news item so much as just an internet phenomenon that I find hilarious. Everywhere now, people are talking about the Luigi death stare. Have you heard of it?
Yes. It's amazing. Mario Kart, right?
Yeah. Mario Kart 8, fun game, just came out. Now, when you hit somebody, the character will kind of look at them, kind of give them a look when they drive by, just be like, yeah, I just got you. But for some reason, Luigi, he's got this, like, this death gaze where he's just, like, looking at you like, yeah, that's right. It's the year Luigi, baby.
It's creepy, man. I've never played that game, but I watched a couple videos on YouTube. It's hilarious.
Yeah, so people will like put them with some like gangster rap background, and they'll like slow down.
Really?
Yeah, like it'll be like the one I saw was like Riding Dirty. Catch me riding dirty, and he's like it's slow motions, and it just zooms in on his face, and he's just giving the death stare to whoever he hit with his shell. It's great. It's become okay. So memes sometimes they explode like this, and they hit critical mass, and then you know they've hit critical mass when they reach like local news outlets.
Yeah.
And then they become like not cool anymore because now the news anchors are talking about them, and that happened really quickly with the Luigi death stare. It's already been on like Fox News at 9 or whatever.
Yeah, it was within like 2 days from when Mario Kart 8 came out for the public. It's crazy. That's fast.
Yeah, way faster than I Can Has Cheeseburger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd be curious about this. This dissemination of information like this is really fascinating to like my advisor, and I'm starting to get into it. I don't know anything about it yet at all, but I'm gonna start my reading probably here in a couple months if I get through the rest of this. But yeah, I'm really curious about these kind of things, how that happens. Like, the tipping point, like by Malcolm Gladwell is one guy who talks about that. In marketing, it's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Now, real quick, also, there's a new TV show on. There's a show called Extra Credits, right? And they've started a new show called Design Club, which focuses on game design. It's on YouTube. So look it up. Look up Design Club on YouTube. I saw their first episode. It was really interesting. It was about why Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers game on the Nintendo, why level 1-1 is perfect for a first level. Like how the level's designed to just teach you how to play the game without having to look at the instruction book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've seen the one about Mega Man X, right? Well, Mega Man X is so amazing.
Love it.
It's along those lines. It analyzes level 1-1 in Mario the same way. Like, okay, this is showing you like, okay, this is how you jump. This is what mushrooms do. Like, this is like preparing you for jumping over pits later. Like those parts with the pipes where there's like ground in between the pipes. And it's like, okay, well later on you're gonna have pits, and so it's trying to show you like in a safe environment that you can jump longer distances. So. If you're at all interested in game design, I find that fascinating.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Like the use of negative space. Like, you know how normally in Mario's like right in the center of the screen?
Yes.
But when you first start level 1-1, he's way on the left, and it's got all this negative space on the right, which is showing you that you have to move forward to progress in the game, because people didn't know that back then. This is before they had platformers. This is back when like Donkey Kong was the height of game design.
Right.
So like the idea of always move right, which just holds true throughout Mario Brothers, is it's teaching you that right at the beginning.
Outstanding. That's great, man. That is super interesting.
Yeah, so check it out. I think our fans would find that pretty fun. They're 5-minute episodes called Design Club on YouTube.
Cool. I will definitely look at that as well. So, well, good. I don't think there's anything else in the news that's newsworthy, but next week is E3.
Yeah, so expect a long news segment there.
Yeah, that should be exciting. Should be exciting. But until then, let's move on to gaming experiences. All right, this is gaming experiences where we talk about things that we did involving games, video games.
One could say experiences that we've had in games.
Experiences gaming, if you will. Yes. Yeah, so we played quite a lot. First of all, we played Age of the Empire again. Very fun. Star Wars role-playing game, tabletop.
Yes, had another delightful experience there. It's getting fun.
How about the ending, huh? You didn't expect that, did you?
I did expect it, for I wrote it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that was very fun. But yeah, that part's fun because, yeah, I remember offering you some feedback on the fact that like it's hard like when you DM or GM and you write a story and then you think, like how did that come across? What were the best parts? What were the worst parts?
Yeah, I feel like you never know.
Yeah, because things you enjoy as the DM may not be something they enjoy. But for me, it was like there are a lot of varied environments. This is one of the benefits of this game and the setting is that sometimes you're on a ship, big old maybe a capital ship. That didn't happen here, but you're on or a regular old like freighter type ship, or sometimes you're like in a cantina. Sometimes you're out in like a Hoth type area, like in the nature. Sometimes you're like on an asteroid. So we kind of did a lot of those, and we had different setting and scenarios, and we were able to perform different functions. Like one time I manned the guns, while we're being chased by these like little headhunter / TIE fighter combos. They were kind of junked together.
Yeah.
And it's just fun because we're all doing different things.
Yeah, that's one of the strengths of Star Wars as a system and a setting, like you said, is you can have a lot of variety. And if you want to have that iconic Star Wars feel, you should include, a space scene and like a rebel base scene and inside of a Death Star thing, like lots of different kinds of settings.
Yeah, and hologram chess. We didn't do that one though. So
you need to play some hologram chess.
We did not do that one, so I'm a little upset. But other than that, no big failures. It was really fun, and then we got in this Star Wars or this asteroid, and you got those space slugs in there and everything. So we're like, oh my god, this is great. And then we are hunting a bounty. It's good stuff, man. It was really fun.
Good. I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. We're trying to play more often, but everyone's so busy with their family priorities. Gamers.
And they're worried about their impact on society being positive.
Yeah, don't have time for gaming.
Ugh, so annoying. But it was really fun. I had a lot of fun, and in fact, I was like, I have a tendency to overcommit to things. So, like, I don't know, starting a podcast in grad school, probably not a great idea. But, yeah, so I was like, oh man, I want to GM the next one. But then I thought, no, Jeremiah, don't be an idiot. You've got a lot of things to do.
You got a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
Let the guy who's on summer vacation handle that.
Summer vacay. Well, it's good.
Also, I played a little. This is a game you reviewed already, so I won't talk about it very much. But I broke down and got Lego Marvel.
Oh, Lego Marvel Heroes.
Yep, Lego Marvel Heroes. It's pretty funny. Lots of little jokes. It's got that lighthearted Lego spin on things.
Yeah.
But I really think that's a game that you should probably play co-op with your 5-year-old son. I think that's the ideal way to play it.
Which is what I did.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. That would be pretty weird to play by yourself. Should have added that caveat.
I was like, because a lot of it is about switching between heroes to solve problems, and I think if you're playing it co-op, it's a lot more rewarding when you're like, oh wait, I'm the Hulk, I can pull that thing open for you, instead of being like, oh geez, I gotta switch back to the Hulk now I gotta switch to Iron Man, now I gotta switch to whoever.
Yeah, I definitely failed to analyze that part of it because that is obviously one of the bigger parts of the fun. It's working together towards some goal, which is one of my research interests and life interests. I love co-op games like that.
Right. So playing it single player, and I thought that I could play it co-op with you since you have the game as well.
Yeah.
But apparently, it's only local co-op on the PC, which is a really dumb choice.
Yeah, that's not great. Yeah, it's couch co-op type thing, so me and my son sit right next to each other and play. But definitely should be able to play online. It's pretty large oversight there, Lego.
Yeah, it's not exactly an uncommon feature these days.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I got they had this those PlayStation Network flash sales and things like that.
Hmm.
Got a couple games. One was Ni no Kuni. You heard of that?
Nai no Kuni. It's one that looks like a Miyazaki game. It's an RPG.
Yeah, that's it. Super fun, and my son was playing it, and this was part of the things where, first of all, he's playing, JRPG all by himself, which is awesome,
Hmm.
and
Lots of
but it's
reading
also got a
skills.
Pokemon. What's that?
Good reading skills developing.
Yeah, that was the second part. Was man, that guy like he was reading all these words, and like he was like unintelligible, and I was just like nice, and like, and then he reads at a pretty good rate if it's not like a big word like that. He reads almost as fast as anyone else.
Yeah.
So I could just see his little skill, getting better and better, and ranking it up.
Getting
So
experience points.
yeah, I'm super excited, man. It reminds me, like I was always a really strong reader when I was a kid too, and games didn't have as much text back then, but some of them did. Like I played Dragon Warrior and Hyrule, a couple of those RPGs when I was a kid, so I definitely practiced those skills too. So
Yeah.
I'm excited, and it's a fun game, guys. Like it's very childish, but it's I would say charming, but not like Child of Light where it has mature themes. This one's actually not mature themes. It's actually just probably for kids, but but it's adults buy it. Like so, it's still fun. It's a fun little system. It's like you get to run around while you're fighting. So like you run and you have like a little charge meter coming up. Like you can defend right away, or you can attack, or you've got spells, or you can summon like a Pokemon type thing to fight for you, little
Mhm.
creature. And so then you like, oh, do I want to make my creatures buff or me buff or what do I want to do here? And also like while your stuff's charging up, let's say you just attacked, well, I want to use a spell now. So there's an overall cool where you have to kind of run away from the monster that's chasing you. And then then you
As
could
you level up, can you determine like which playstyle you like to do best, like focus on magic or focus on summons or?
yeah, a little bit. It's not as branch heavy as like other RPGs, but yeah, you can definitely do that. Like the way you spend your resources, because you can give them little treats that level them up, so you can get your favorite kind of little Pokemon dudes. They're
Mhm.
called familiars because you're a wizard, but you can like you say, oh, I like this one a lot, and I'm spending a lot of money on treats rather than like equipment or things for myself. So
So I'm curious what route your son takes. Like, is that kind of interesting to watch, like how he develops his characters?
definitely, yeah. At first, I wanted to like influence them, but I caught myself because I'm like you, where you. I remember one time looking at your Pokemon thing, and you had leveled up like everything, even like the Metapod to like 99 or something.
Yeah.
Everyone was really high, is all I remember. Like a generalized approach, right? Like get them all up.
Yeah. Well, it's part of my completionist obsession where I just want everything to be maxed out.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm the same sort of way where I always train my weaknesses. But he like just buffed up this one over and over again, and I was like, well, what about these other two? And he said, why would I do that? I only like playing this one. Like those guys aren't fun. And I was like, well, is it because they're low level or because of the fact that you don't like their playstyle? He's like, no, his skill stinks, like the skill he has.
Uh,
And I was like, oh, okay. If you're not gonna, I mean, I guess that makes sense. So like I made sure I didn't, like influence him too much. But it was really fun. Like I
Bit of a
read,
specialist.
yeah, yeah. There's like a character in it who has a Scottish accent, so I'd read that part for him, and he'd read all the other parts out loud. It was really fun.
Cool.
Pretty cool little game, but probably not for like just straight up adults all by yourself.
Now, also this week you've been doing a lot of streaming.
Hmm. And a lot of crashing.
Yeah. And so what have you been playing beyond that?
Phew, Castlevania, man. Oh, so fun.
One of our
Castlevania.
higher rated episodes as well.
Yep, and one of our most downloaded. Um, oh man, I'm a Castlevania fan in general, and this reboot has been ridiculous. So it's amazing. I can't really say much without spoilers, but I've already played Lords of Shadow 1, and then I just finished Mirror of Fate, the one from the DS.
Hmm.
So they did an HD port to the computer and to consoles, and it's really cool. And it got bad reviews.
Yeah,
But
I don't get that. I had a lot of fun with it.
me too. They said it was confused and the control scheme sucked, but I was like, no, it's a platform. It's great. And it's not confused. It was a very clear storyline. Like it made it super clear, and it kept tying it together. I thought it was great storytelling because, like in the beginning, you see this, like you start out as Gabriel Belmont, who ends up being, Dracula, right? Or he's already Dracula in this game, but in Lords of Shadow 1, you end up being Dracula. Well, when you start out this one, it's like, oh, okay, I'm Gabriel Belmont, and then it says, oh, look, I'm interacting with this creature. You interact with this creature, and then you see both of those people later on down the line multiple times. So like it ties those together, and then it'll like have one person's storyline. They get to some endpoint, and then it's like, oh, I see these other people here, and then you play through their storyline that got them there. Like it's a very clear storyline.
Yeah, I was not confused at all.
It's right in your face the entire time. It's like, oh, hey, look, there's those other guys. Remember those other guys you encountered before? They're still here. Look, there they are walking down a corridor.
What path did they take to get here? Oh, now let's play that.
Exactly. It's really obvious. And as you're playing your character, occasionally you run into the other characters that you see because you switch off like viewpoints kind of. So you'll see him at some other point. You're like, oh yeah, that's when I was wondering who that was when I was playing through his storyline. It's a constant in your face, obvious intertwining of stories.
Yeah, that reviewer, I can't imagine him trying to read like a Game of Thrones. Just like, wait, where's Ned Stark? Why am I reading about the Imp? What's happening?
Or even a child's book. He's like, see Spot do what? Who's the Spot character?
Where did Spot come from?
He's worthless. That guy's worthless. But it got a couple other bad reviews from other places too, which they were just saying, oh, with all these epic characters, you should be able to tell a better tale. It's like, how could you tell a better tale? No, I can't give spoilers, but it's awesome. I ended that and I was like, wow, that was cool. I said out loud to myself because it was that cool.
Yeah, I remember back when I didn't think you'd ever play the game, I was like, dude, even if you never play this game, just watch all the cutscenes. It's a cool story. And I linked you like a YouTube video with them.
Yeah, it was like an hour long, but it had like thousands of views because people watch that shit. It's good. Anyway, well, whatever. I finished that one, and the next one in the chronology is technically, I mean, Mirror of Fate isn't. It's kind of a backstory. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a prequel, really.
Yeah, it's like a prequel. It's a prequinterlude.
Yeah, prequinterlude, exactly. That's what it is. Yeah. So it's kind of a weird one in there, but it helps flesh some things out. Mm-hmm. But Lords of Shadow 2 is what I just started playing, and because I got that, already talked about that PSN or the sale on Amazon that where they were doing their mayhem. Well, it started out and it's in modern day, which is weird. I'm trying to figure out how I like this. So right now I'm in a flashback, so I'm not sure, and I'm at the beginning of the game. But the cinema scenes, oh my gosh, so sweet. In the beginning, I won't really tell you anything about it. This part doesn't really have anything to do with the plot, but it starts off with your castle's under siege, and you just ran out of like blood basically. So and he's like, oh, what I think he says like, what exquisite timing, and so he throws his cup on the ground, and then all these like people run in. It's just awesome, and it ends up in this epic fight. So anyway,
plus it's fun. It's fun to play the bad guy sometimes.
Yeah,
cut loose and be a badass vampire.
Spoiler warning, like Mirror of Fate, very cool. Nothing really that gory in there, except in the end a little bit. But this game, do not play this game in front of children. I learned that very quickly. You are a sicko, and it makes you realize what kind of a monster you are. There's even like a part where there's a kid, and it's like, this has nothing to do with the plot. It's just flavor. But there's this kid, and this kid's like, oh no! And then the parents are like, get over here, get away from that thing! And you're like slowly like walking towards them, and they're like, no! And the dad steps in front, he throws something at you, and he goes, go away! And then you like walk up and do something horrible. But it's really graphic and really bad, and it makes you realize right away you are the monster. So it's trying to decouple you or starting to pull you away from that affection you got for Gabriel in the first game. Mm-hmm. Now you're starting to see that he is no longer that thing. He is becoming something quite different.
Yeah, it's like the Walter White to Heisenberg arc, where at the end of season 5 of Breaking Bad, you're like, that guy is a dick.
Yeah,
but I still kind of root for him.
Yeah. And the mythology in this game, oh, so cool. Like, there's different forces that are going on, and like, you're kind of this agent of death, whereas there's still Satan and God and that kind of thing, but you kind of work for this. For Death himself, who is a character in the old Castlevania games, so it was a major power.
Mini boss.
It's really sweet, but you use blood magic, so it's sick. It's sick. Just, yeah. Oh, but also,
mature.
They found ways to put, like, to have Dracula, have him a believable character who's not, just completely owning everything around him. And also, so they scaled up the bad guys, and they also made it so that there's even parts like where there's stealth, so you get to use sweet powers like disappearing into shadows and turning into like rats and stuff, and like using bats, and you just feel cool. You're like, oh, I'm so evil. It's fun.
Well, I'm hoping it comes on sale again soon so I can check it out.
Yeah, and if not, you can play it when you're down here.
True.
But
that's how I played the first Lords of Shadow.
That's right, man. Play it. So fun. Anyway, but that's all I've really been playing.
All right, well, let's move on to in-depth analysis.
In-depth analysis. So, for those of you who are just joining us and did not listen to the first part, this is episode 41, and we're talking about illusion of choice and player choice in video games. This was a listener suggested topic, and I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot to say here. It's a big topic, and I thought we could just start off talking about how it relates to video games, because we are ostensibly a gaming podcast.
Ostensibly.
So my first thing when I read this suggestion, the first thing that came to my mind was invisible borders. I'm talking about games like GoldenEye, where you're outside in Siberia and you're running around, and suddenly you get to a wall that you just can't get past. It's just a wall of air, an invisible border. And so they're trying to create this illusion that you can go anywhere, but the hardware limitations are limiting you to within this little constrained space.
Yeah.
Lots of old games did that. Can you think of any others where you'd had that sensation where you're like, I can go anywhere, just kidding, there's a border?
Oh yeah, all the way from like Mario Brothers all the way to like even modern games. And modern games, it's really frowned upon. Like people will shit on you in reviews for that, which I agree. I think that's just not creative.
It's just lazy at this point. We've got the hardware.
Yeah, just put a pit or something. I mean, I can't jump across that. It's a pit. I get it.
Right. And the next thing it made me think of was choices that aren't choices.
What do you mean?
So, for example, Telltale Games, right?
Yeah.
Their big thing is like the choices you make influence what happens at the end. Like, for example, and there's some spoilers here for people who haven't played The Walking Dead Season 1. I won't go into specifics, but in the very first episode, you have a choice about who lives and who dies. There's two characters that are going to die. You have to save one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh man, this was a great choice because now this character's going to be around for a while. 2 episodes later, the character that you saved dies. So no matter what choice you made, episode 4, that person is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you start to wonder, like, wait, is this choice really affecting much?
Mm-hmm.
Or like in The Wolf Among Us, sometimes they'll be like, there's 3 places you can go to. Which one are you going to go to first? But you just go to all of them. It doesn't really change that much.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that happened in the most recent one. This is what I was kind of scared about with Telltale Gaming in general. Telltale Games got really big, for those people who don't know. And they started with like Back to the Future and some crappy ones before that. And they really got big with Walking Dead. That's, I think, where they started raking in their cash. Well, it got everyone's attention. So now they're doing a Borderlands thing, or Borderlands world. They're doing one in the Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing one in Walking Dead. And now they're doing one in the Fable universe, which is a comic book. It's basically like urban fantasy for storybook characters like, Walking Dead Rapunzel and Snow White, that kind of thing. Well, I was afraid whenever they got all these contracts, because, I mean, obviously, if all these people are knocking on your door and they're very important and they're willing to pay you, a few $1 million contract, you're going to take the work and hire more people. But the problem is I was like, oh, I hope their quality doesn't go down. And that kind of happened, because this last one, it's still great. I mean, it's fantastic. So, like, went down from a must-play, like, 10, because I think I'll reference this game a lot, down to, like, a 9.6 or something. Like, still amazing. Definitely play it. But I did notice that, like, in that last one, there was kind of one of those, where do you want to go first? Quick! There's only so much time. And in the first one, the first season, first episode, first few episodes, that mattered.
Yeah.
Like, where you went completely changed, completely, had a large impact on what happened, because me and David oftentimes we go to a separate place and we compare notes.
Uh-huh.
But this one, like, we compared notes on the last one. David was like, where'd you go first? I went to this direction. I went to these 3, and I was like, well, I went to those 3 in the exact opposite order. And so we expected to see some difference, but there was none.
Yeah, same thing happened in the most recent episode of The Walking Dead Season 2. There was a character they introduced who's kind of annoying, and he's nervous because he doesn't want to displease the boss,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was being very I chose a certain way where I was just doing one thing. You chose like the exact opposite way, and I was like, oh well, maybe he will survive there. But his death was so important to the storyline of that episode that no matter what you choose, he's gonna die.
Which that's the whole illusion of choice thing. I don't like that, because it really, the point that made his death, the point that made was, something that could be made through many ways.
Right.
it, like, oh, shit just got real for whatever reason, right?
But they seem like they were stuck on the shit got real because this guy got murdered thing, and then all the choices, because there's a whole bunch of choices you can make up to that that will like affect how he's viewed by the people who may kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like all those choices were just illusions because no matter what, he's going to end up falling to his death.
Yeah, we made almost the opposite decision on everything, and still, like, he died same place, same way, same circumstances, same effects.
Yeah, so that's definitely an illusion of choice. Now, this used to be not very subtle at all. If any of you have played old school, like Zelda or old school RPGs, they'll have dialogue like, "Link, will you help rescue Princess Zelda and restore the Triforce?" And then you can say yes or no. And sometimes as a kid, just to be like contentious or argumentative, I'd be like, no, I'm not gonna do it, just to see what would happen, right? Because you're a kid, you're testing your boundaries. You want to see if the game will let you do things, You're like, oh, cool, I've got a choice, but is this choice real? And so I would say no. And they go, but Link, you have to save it, or else the kingdom will fall into peril. And I say no, and then it's like, but Link, you have to save it, or else the kingdom will fall into peril. And I'd say no, but Link, and you get stuck in this loop until you say yes, and then it lets you move on into the game.
Yeah, it was clearly programming where it's like, if 0, ask again. If 1, advance story plot. There's no other option. But, okay, so there's those games. But then, by contrast, like, okay, so I'm playing this game, Lords of Shadow 2, and I said it's in a modern setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to spoil anything, I don't think. But, maybe I will spoil something. So if you plan on playing these games and you haven't seen any commercials for it, because it's in the commercials, which made me sad, don't listen for the next, like, maybe minute. Anyway, what happens is you end up in a modern storyline because you got, pwned, and so you were presumed to be dead by all but Alucard, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm still okay, I just need blood. So you wake up all sick and you're in modern day and you're like, oh, I need blood. You're walking around,
Mm-hmm.
And the first person I see is like this hobo, and she's like, will you help me? And I was like, oh, yes. And like I hit the button to grab her and to suck her blood, and it didn't work. And I was like, what? I clicked it again, and nothing happened. I was like, oh, I guess there's a specific person it wants me to to feed from. Okay, fine. So I walk past, there's another person, and this one's a prostitute, and she's like, hey, honey. She comes up close, and I was like, oh, this must be it, because that happens a lot in horror movies. They grab, like, the streetwalkers. So I hit the button, nothing. I was like, oh, okay. So I keep walking, and finally, it gets to this cutscene. And I was like, okay. At first, I was like, oh, man, I wish you could do that. But then I thought, no, there's clearly police around. And, like, so if I would have done that, that's like in, like, GTA, or a lot of games allow you to do those things, like just shoot a random pedestrian. But then, like, it kind of Fs the game for the next 5 minutes, and you're probably just going to reload it anyway. So
it would be nice to have the choice to F the game. Like that should, like, trigger a cutscene where, like, the police, like, take you down or something, and then you have to start over. Like, give you the choice to mess up and then learn from that and then try it again.
I think so, too. I think that would be the best scenario. Or, like, a cutscene where it shows him, like, a lot of people are, like, showing instructions through cameras now. God of War was really famous and infamous for this, both, good and bad. But it would show you the pathway. You come up to a puzzle, and it's like, oh, and the camera would pan over and go, look at this thing, and this thing, and this thing, in this correct order, and then this thing. It's not really a puzzle at that point, right? It's bro-proof, so, like, bros could play it. Well, anyway, in this one, like, it could do that, but a little less subtly. Like, it would do this in, like, games like L.A. Noire, or another one's Heavy Rain, where, like, it would show the character, and they kind of, like, it could show it, like, Gabriel or Dracula, and he, like, just looks over his shoulder and sees the cops, and then looks back at her. Something like that to show, like, well, look, there's these cops right here. Do I still want to do this?
Right.
That would be cool.
Yeah, there's and we talked about our very first episode, linear versus open world sandbox games, right?
Yeah.
But what we didn't talk about is through tabletop role-playing games how the same principle applies. There's actually two DM styles that they both have their fans and their detractors. One of them is what people kind of call the railroad style.
Right. Oh, and before just going to butt in for 1 second, because we just referenced our first episode. How bad was that thing, man? Jeez.
It was not great.
Yeah, if anyone goes and listens to it, we're sorry.
And it is our most downloaded episode to this day, so.
Yep, it's good content. It's just quality, and everything else was garbage. We didn't have a format. Everything was just us talking.
Yeah. And no one wants to hear that. So now another hour of us talking.
Yeah.
but yeah, there's like the railroad style, which is like it implies you're on the tracks no matter what happens. Like, so let's say I'm a DM or a GM. Let's say we're playing like a, I don't know, pick a system, D&D, Star Wars.
Sure, yeah. Well, D&D. Let's say a lot of people are familiar with
Okay,
that.
so I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm the DM, and the plot is the mayor's daughter gets kidnapped by orcs. I want them to go rescue the daughter from the orcs. I flesh out the entire orc camp. I flesh out the city. I don't really spend a lot of time anywhere else because they're not going there. And then I say, okay, the mayor's daughter's gotten kidnapped by orcs. And you're like, all right, well, whatever. Now, in a railroad campaign, I've got to make you go rescue that princess because otherwise there's nothing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a DM will do is they'll kind of force it, They'll be like, oh, well, there's a bunch of rocks, and now you can't go to the east anymore. Like the world will kind of create a little path that you have to follow, like a video game would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Versus a sandbox campaign, you're like, well, I don't really care about the daughter. I want to go explore those mountains to the south. And the DM would be like, okay, well, all right. And you just have to start making up as he goes or have enough notes prepared beforehand.
Right.
So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. What do you think are some? Well, obviously, what do you think are some disadvantages to like the railroad style?
Okay, yeah. What comes straight to mind is like, okay, you've got first of all, you don't feel like any choice you make is meaningful, like because for actual storylines, so you're less probably pulled into the plot. That might be one.
Like you feel like a less of a sense of agency.
Yeah, less sense of agency. Also, you may be less inclined to care about the plot because you're not making meaningful decisions, so you never have to process it. And if you don't have to process it, then we know that doesn't. You're less likely to remember those things and consider them worthwhile of your time.
Right. And what about some advantages to that style of preparation?
Well, it's easier on the DM or the GM.
And how does that translate? Like, is it just a more convenience, or is there anything else going on?
I mean, I'm thinking of convenience. What do you mean?
So I'm thinking about like when you're going to a convention and you sit down. There's kind of this. There's a guy with an adventure prepared. He doesn't know who the players are going to be. There's kind of an expectation that you're going to go where the plot wants you to go because that'll be the most fun game. Like you could try and go off the rails. Like I don't want to rescue the princess. I want to explore those mountains, and you could do that. But then you're not going to have as much fun because you know that the DM's time all went into preparing that orc encounter, right?
Right.
So like if you one of the advantages of a railroad game is that the game is going to be really fun. The pacing is going to be perfect. If you just let go of the illusion of like I can go anywhere I want and just kind of go where the rails lead, it's like a rail shooter, right? Like it's like a Star Fox level. Like you can't fly in any direction, but that level is pretty fun the way they presented it.
Oh right, yeah.
So I think like a sandbox game would have less. Because it's so much more freeform, by necessity, if he's going to put the same amount of time into it, it's going to be less fleshed out and less polished.
Well, can't you though? I was going to talk about a hybrid. So, sorry, go ahead about the. I think you were still setting up your dichotomy.
Yeah, so the other side would be like a sandbox game. Like, what are the advantages of that? Like, obviously, you have more sense of freedom, but the disadvantage would be maybe less polish.
Yeah, and the pacing sucks. In my experience, the sandbox games, like a lot of times, because you're that kind of DM where you let us do anything we want, and
sometimes it grinds to a halt, right? Because you're like, well,
yeah.
As one of the big pitfalls of the sandbox game is sometimes the objective isn't clear, right? Because you have too much freedom. It's that paralyzation of choice.
Right.
So you're like, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where is the adventure? Like, what have you planned? What would be fun to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny because as a GM growing up, and even in your campaign, the Ashfar campaign you did, there's a couple scenarios where that happened. Where it's like, well, what do you want to do? And we were just paralyzed by choice. We're like, I don't know, let me see a map. Like, I don't, and it was almost not fun because we were like, well, we want to go to the place where it's going to be awesome, And then, or like in mine, I did that a lot whenever I was becoming hopefully a better DM in Dungeons and Dragons. I would give these choices, and I'd just be like, what do you guys want to do next? And you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, what are the options? And I'm like, anything you want. You guys were like, I don't know. I guess
too much. It's like our problems with it's like my problem with Grand Theft Auto, right? Like it's just too much. I want to know where the fun is, or my problem with Oblivion, right? Like I just want to know where the cool stuff is. I don't necessarily want to pin butterflies and build a house.
Right, yeah, because one of the things that guides you in sandbox games is the driving factor is boredom.
Right.
That's the aversive section. Like you go check something out, like the mountains, and you're like, okay, so you go in the mountains. There's a lot of rocks, some trees. There's nothing substantially awesome up here. Then I'm like, okay, I want to look around, and you're like, okay, so what do you want to look at? And I'm like, turn over some rocks. And you're like, there's nothing there, just some bugs. And I'm like, okay. Uh, Eventually I get bored, right? I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go back in town and check out that Mayor's Daughter thing.
Right.
So necessarily, because boredom is a driving factor, you're gonna experience boredom. So that's good because it's self-correcting, but it's also bad because you experience boredom while you're sitting there.
Right.
It's not as quick, compact, like movie type scenario.
It makes for a less interesting story, but a better simulation. So it really depends on if your preference is for like story or simulation, I think, because if you have more of a railroad game and you're willing as a player to just go with it, to like let go of some of your freedom of choice, like you're gonna experience like a tight movie, right? You're gonna watch Star Wars Episode 4, you're gonna watch Lord of the Rings, and there's gonna be like everything's moving towards a purpose, it's building to a climax, but it's less realistic. So if your preference is for better realism, you might want a simulation game where you're gonna get bored sometimes because guess what? That's how life is. But you have the freedom, like you have the freedom to get bored, right? Like it's your own fault if you're bored.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the blame doesn't go on the GM. Whereas, like, when you railroad it, if I'm bored, I'm like, come on, dude, this is clearly where we're supposed to be, and it's boring.
Right.
The blame is on him or her. But so I think this is what I was gonna say a little bit earlier when I totally butt in. I think kind of a hybrid of those is the best. Of course, I mean everyone's like, I'm in the middle, which is
the golden mean.
But what does that look like? Well, for me, like one of the things that I found was it's fun to like, let's say that you didn't want to go to the Mayor's Daughter thing, right? You're like, no, I don't care about the Mayor's Daughter at the Orc camp. Who cares? I'm gonna go check out the mountains. What I like to do now as a DM, a lot of the times if I can, I think, how can I use the material I've got, like mine it for as much as I've got, and still do this? Oh, well, what if the main Orc camp is there, but there's a small like contingent up in the mountains? So when you guys get up there, there's a small contingent, there's a scout there, so it still redirects you back towards the main plot. But it does give you moral agency. So, like, you guys go up there, and because you went in the mountains, like maybe you got, like a layout to the base, which is like, oh, cool. So this wasn't completely a waste of time, and we actually got a little benefit from it. But it's clearly not the main fun. Like the fun per time spent was not highest. We clearly could have just went to the thing and then had it all done. But like, You know what I mean? Like I try to make the plot, no matter what, kind of. It's almost like a fatalistic thing. You were fated to this destiny, and you have choice, but it's all going to direct you back to where you need to be.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say with the illusion of choice.
Right.
So like sometimes as a DM, and it's important that you maintain the illusion, right? Like if you let your players know they're doing this, like they won't have fun anymore. Like it's almost like you have to deceive them into having fun sometimes. Like if you have like a really cool, let's say, just to simplify it, you're in a dungeon, there's a door on the left, a door on the right, and you've planned out some really awesome stuff on the door on the right, but you haven't really planned out much for the door on the left because you don't think they're going to go that way. And just to be contrarians, they go to the door on the left. Well, they don't know what your map looks like in your head, so you just switch those two hallways, and now all the cool stuff's on the door to the left, and the door to the right was the boring one. And like as long as they don't know you're doing that, they're going to be like, oh yeah, we're having fun and our choices matter. And you're like, yeah, your choices matter. You have freedom of choice and you're having fun. So it's a little deceptive, but it's a good shortcut for DMs who, like let's say, it doesn't have to be that simplistic. Let's say you had a really cool encounter with muggers, right? Like you had this cool thing where they're going to go through an alley and they were going to get mugged, but they never went to that alley and they never even went to that town. Well, you can take that entire encounter and drop it anywhere, right? Like now they're getting held up by bandits on the highway, or now they're getting jumped by kobolds in the dungeon. Like you can kind of just reskin everything and still use all that work, so all that polish and hard work doesn't get wasted.
Right. Yeah, sometimes I do that. Completely transplant my adventure to wherever they're going. Like you said, just switch the doors. Like so I'd make it a mountain base for the orcs. Be like, oh, hey, you're going to the mountains, but as it turns out, that's where the orcs were anyway. And that one's kind of obvious, but sometimes it's not. Like you said, that's when you want to use it, when they can't tell. But now, like, this actually informs my prep. So, like, what I do now is I think of the main adventure and I, like, dream it all out and I see it out in my mind so that I know questions or answers to a lot of the questions, like, are there ropes? I'm like, yeah, there's a bunch of ropes over top. And I try to explain as much as possible, like, there's dripping carbonite or something from the ceiling so that they know what they're dealing with. But also, when I'm prepping, I try to Well, also because what that does is it informs the players that you are in the main content right now. This is all very well thought out, right?
Right.
By giving them detailed descriptions. But I also think of like, okay, so let me get some material up for like I'll get like a little road map or like a little crappy battle map, and then like put a couple token characters up there and get it ready in case there's anything they do other than the plot. That way they've got a little fight, a little bit of experience, a little bit of something, and then I can usually think of a way to tie it in. So it's like, let's say I got a bar room, a bar brawl, and they say I want to go to the mountains. And I'm like, okay, so my side content here that I made, real short, real quick, it's just real bare bones, was a bar tavern and like 3 like rough and tumble bar patrons, So what I would do is I'd say, okay, how could I work that in? Okay, mountain. Let's say there's a mountaintop inn, and you guys get there, and then I build some intrigue. I'm like, it looks like the door's been ajar, and there's no one inside. And you guys are like, what? I'm like, there's horses out front. There's ties for horses, but they've been cut, severed by some rough, material, by some rough weapon. And they're like, what are you talking about? And then I would just take those tokens of bar patrons and make them goblins. So when they go in, I'm like, you got jumped by goblins. And then they go, what? And then, what? All these goblins have what? Oh, they're a scouting party for an orc base. That kind of thing. So if you get that generic material on the side, I feel like you can really work in almost anything.
Yeah, and like also making flowcharts that they kind of like go off and then converge back together again. Like, for example, let's say your guys get ambushed by orcs, right? And then on your flowchart, you're like, the players fight the orcs or they flee from the orcs. But either way, it's going to lead to, like, eventually if they fight, like, there's going to be enough orcs where they have to flee. So either way, they're going to eventually flee, right? And then they're getting on horses, and let's say that their horses, outrun the orcs, then they're going to go this way, otherwise they're going to go this way. But either way, it's kind of all flowing, like it branches out and then flows back into the next scene you want them to get to.
Right.
So it kind of is. It also kind of makes me think about time travel games like Chrono Trigger, right? Like there's this theory in time travel, like, can time be altered? Like, it's the metaphor they'll use is like a river, right? Like, you can go back up the river, you can throw a rock in the river, but it's not going to alter like the great events. Like, it's still going to happen. They bring this up in X-Men: Days of Future Past. It's come up in Dragonlance. There's some time travel in the old Dragonlance novels, and they use this analogy. But the idea is that, like, you really can alter big events. And that's kind of how these campaigns are set. Is like, you really can alter, like, no matter what happens, it's kind of going towards one place, but you want to give them the illusion that they made a difference somehow.
Yeah, and sometimes it's explicit, like Star Fox, for example. You remember, like, the 64 version, you could pick different ways, but like there's some central part, maybe an asteroid field that you go in no matter what, and then at the end you're definitely going to fight like this Andros guy inside of a ship or whatever, but getting there you've got a few different ways. They also do that in Faster Than Light, FTL, the Steam and Xbox Live game. Same thing, like it's like, oh, I can go with these different routes, and look, there's a civilian sector here and engineer sector, but I'm always gonna get back to this middle one. Like,
and that was like the big thing about Chrono Trigger, was it was like you were trying to prevent the apocalypse, and you could actually stop that from happening. So like they actually made time travel where time could be altered. It gave the freedom. That's why Chrono Trigger was revolutionary for its time, because it had so many different endings, because you could actually alter so many things that you had a lot of freedom to change the world around you. So you could have an ending where you save the world. You could have an ending, like there was one ending where you go back to the dinosaur age and you do something wrong, and then you come back and everybody's dinosaurs now, like they survived instead of mammals. So like there was a lot of different endings like that. It was really revolutionary for the time.
Yeah, that was fun. That would be like the ultimate GM if they did that for you somehow. Yeah. Like with all those super branching but coming back to one. Usually it's like more nodes, like you were talking about, kind of these nodes of like, I know this is going to happen, I know this is going to happen. And there'll be like 5 things that, like, stepping stones where you're definitely going to touch these, but how they get there is different. Whereas like
kind of modern game design, right? Like what you're saying is like you're going to go someplace, but you have to choose. Like the path you take is up to you, but you're going to get to the end goal.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Thief, like where there's a couple alleyways that are actually have to go through, but like you can go high, go low, go to the side over here and like skirt around, or all those different things. Or you can just run straight through the light and let everyone chase you.
And sometimes it's like with modern games, like the path, like the level is set, right? Like you have freedom, but you can't just say, like, let's say you're playing Deus Ex and you're like, I can go through it stealthily, I can go through the vents, I can just shoot my way through it. Like you can choose the path you take, but you can't just leave the level entirely. You can't just like blow a hole through the wall and then like go outside to the streets and then find a cafe and drink a coffee.
Right.
Like you still have to play that level. But they give you freedom of choice and moralistic choices, right? Like, are you killing a lot of people? Are you not killing a lot of people? Like, at the end, which of the three endings do you choose? Like, you have your choices there.
Right. I don't really like those where it's like forced, like the three endings, like A, B, or C. That
Yeah,
like
Mass
Deus
Effect,
Ex got
Deus
hit.
Ex.
Yeah, Mass Effect, exactly. At the end, it's like, oh, was it left or right? And that's it. They're like many different endings. It's like,
Yeah, I
no.
think the problem with Mass Effect was that they were making it this thing where your choices like matter throughout the entire game, right? Like if you make a choice in Mass Effect 1, it could come back in Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
And they were doing a really good job up until the ending, and then like all the choices you made up to this point don't matter anymore. Here are the three endings. Do you want the green ending, the blue ending, or the red ending?
Yeah. And they even added in the third one, didn't they? I think there was only two in the beginning. It's pretty sad.
Yeah, it
Same thing with
fleshed it
Deus
out.
Ex. There was like three, and they added in two more, but they're essentially just like throwaways.
Yeah.
Pretty sad, but especially with a game that makes you laboriously think about each one. That's the thing. Like we're cognitive misers, right? That's what the idea of what it's called. It just means we're lazy thinkers. We don't want to think unless we have to, and if we do, it damn well better be worth our time. So like one thing is like it's a way we process information to make decisions. It completely depends. We only think about it if we have to, right? But yeah, so like for this, if they make us think about it, there's that whole, the whole self-perception theory or cognitive dissonance is like if I thought about that, it must have been worthwhile because I would only think about worthwhile things.
Mm-hmm.
So then in the end, when it happens and you're like, I went through all that like thinking and you made me think, like it's kind of you feel kind of like I should get something out of that. I spent all that time really like dripping over the situation. It's like in Walking Dead, you're kind of like, oh, I had to shoot someone. You made me shoot someone that I thought had a really important part in the plot. And
Yeah.
it turns out neither of them did. They're both throwaways.
I remember when that character died in The Walking Dead 2, I was like, oh man, like if only I had handled that situation better, Like I could have saved her, because it's like the situation kind of escalates and she gets shot, or he gets shot, depending on who you saved. And I was like, oh man, I remember walking away from that going, I really dropped the ball, but, got to keep pressing on. And then I ended up looking online, and it's like, no matter what happens, that character was destined, she was fated to die at that spot.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Then it became less awesome, and it reminds me of like when I think about these ideas of like you talk about fatalism, like that character was destined kind of to die no matter what.
Right.
Like it reminds me of Greek tragedies, right? Like you've got your Oedipus, with the the basic storyline where he goes to the Oracle, and the Oracle's like, you're gonna sleep with your mother and you're going to murder your father, and he's like, oh no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna defy fate, and so he ends up like running away from home, going to a new kingdom, which is actually his real parents, and ends up murdering his father and marrying his mother. So it's what they call like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with Perseus. It's a repeating meme in mythology. Like Perseus had the same kind of thing where his father learned from an oracle that he would kill him, or not really his father, his adopted father, his wife's husband. So basically, a god, Zeus would impregnate his wife, and that child would kill him one day. And he's like, not on my watch. And he like puts not his wife, his daughter. He puts his daughter up in a tower, and then Zeus is like, oh, good, I can reach her easier up here, and impregnates her. And then he's like, well, I can't kill the kid because the gods will be mad, so I'm gonna put them in a box and send them sailing away. And then kid ends up growing up far from home, comes back, kills his father without knowing it. It's this whole idea of like you're fated to do something, you have your free will, but the choices you make are going to lead you along this like predestined path.
Yeah, and isn't it like that in the Bible too? I mean, anything with prophecy, I feel like is mutually inclusive with determinism.
Right. Well, there was Jesus,
something like,
he says Peter's going to deny him 3 times. It's like, well, does that mean that Jesus caused Peter to deny him 3 times? Did he have no free will on that? Like, could he have done otherwise?
Right, exactly. And especially because would he have done that if you told him that anyway? Like, yeah, exactly. It's a whole, like, if someone ever says, this is how this thing's going to play out, like, it instantly should make you think of, like, wait, can I even affect this then? Because why did you tell me, first of all? Like, what's the point? And 2, like, why would that vision even be given to you? Because if it's like okay, so this is wow, we're about to get religious here, so careful, people. But the Garden of Eden, this was one of my biggest arguments that I got into whenever I was kind of searching out. And I was talking to one of my friends that was believer, and I said, I don't know if the Garden of Eden, I don't think he had a choice. And they were like, well, of course he did. He chose to eat that apple after Eve chose to pick it and eat it. I said, did she? And they're like, yeah, of course. They were clearly sinful. God told them not to. And then I said, well, okay, so imagine you're setting this up and you're God and you can see in the future, right? Like I think everybody agrees that you can see in the future. Most belief systems. So he knows. Okay, so he's making this Garden of Eden, and he's crafting it. And he's like, oh, look, I'm gonna put some fronds here. They can lay down on. Look, these animals over here are gonna be chilling, just letting them look at them. They're gonna be totally cool. This is gonna be great. This is gonna be great, he says. But he already knows that, like, okay, so that knowledge, the tree of knowledge, there, like, it's right there in the middle or somewhere. It's irrelevant where it is, but let's say it's in the middle. It's right there in the middle. Well, God knows. Whenever he started making that tree, he's like, just making a tree is all. He's like, oh wait, if I put it here, Adam's gonna eat this. Eventually it's gonna be the fall of all mankind. Well, I don't want that. So, well, if he didn't want it, it wouldn't have happened. So that's kind of a funny thing. But he says, okay, well, I'm going to move it to the left here. All right. Oh, no, Adam's still going to eat it. Huh. What if I put it just outside of the garden? Okay, we know he'd never eat it then because he can't leave. There's angels. Okay. Or I guess later there were. But let's say, like the 1 million miles away, maybe in a different dimension, something that we could never touch it. We know for sure.
Maybe don't put it there where he can reach it.
Yeah, like maybe we know for sure he's not gonna touch it. But then God's like, well, I'll put it 10 inches closer. Still not gonna get it. Okay, 20 inches closer. He still doesn't take it. Okay, 30 feet in, right in the middle, right smack dab in the middle. Oh, you know what? Wow, he still doesn't take it. Lower the branches? Lower the branches. Nope, nothing. Okay, so I need some fruit that's okay, I made a spiky fruit. Okay, I need to make something that's more attractive. So red and delicious and tasty. Yeah, that. Yeah, and I made humans to really love that kind. Okay. Well, he's still not going to take it. He still won't take the damn thing. He's too... Oh, I'm going to let Satan in to talk to him. He still won't take it. Eve? Oh, Eve will. And then Adam will. All right, got it. Then he did it. He knows in the future when he was making that tree of how it would play out. He knows also of all the other scenarios in which it would not have happened. And then he knows, and then he chose the one that would definitely end up with him eating that apple. So right. Did he have a choice at all, Adam? I don't think so.
So E.R. Dodds actually wrote an essay it's called On Misunderstanding the Oedipus Rex, and it kind of talks about this idea of foreknowledge and free will and predestination. And he argues that free will is not mutually exclusive with predestination because, like, the idea of knowing something does not necessitate that you're taking away the person's will to choose it. Like, for example, like if I put Hitler in a room with a Jew and I put a gun in the room and I know Hitler's going to kill the Jew because he hates Jews, he's got a gun there.
Yeah.
Like, I did not force Hitler to kill the Jew. I just know Hitler's nature well enough that that's how he's going to react in that situation. So Hitler still chose to kill the Jew. I just knew that with a certainty it was going to happen because I know Hitler well enough. And so that's kind of what E.R. Dodds is arguing in his essay, is that, like, God knows human nature well. Like Jesus knows Peter so well. He knows Peter's going to deny him 3 times, but Peter still makes that choice to do it.
Right. Oh, I get that. Except this gets around that because if you have, like, let's say you're the room crafter, like in this scenario you just did, and you know for sure that if you put the gun outside the door, he won't do it. If you put the gun inside the door but in the very front where he can't see it in the shadow, he's not going to do it. And
I definitely create a situation where Hitler can kill the Jew, and that's kind of my fault, right? Like, I should not have Hitler in the room with the gun and the Jew. But
if you can see into the future, which presumably God can. So, I mean, it's not like I don't implicate everyone who's like, I left my kid in a room that had, like a sleeping pill, and suddenly I'm implicated. I'm like, oh, no, I mean, obviously that's not your fault, unless it was like open and down and he was hungry. Yes, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you can see the future for sure, 100%, like God can, that is your fault. Like that, me as a parent, if I left those sleeping pills open, if I had him closing up on a thing, he wouldn't have got it. But if I put it down open, well, he still wouldn't have got it. What if I put him and I stuck him in candy? He would get him. Then, yes, the kid still has free choice, free will, but it's not like he had a choice in taking that because I can see the future, right? So,
well, like taking it away from a child because they might not have a choice because they're not necessarily like responsible for their own actions, right? Because they're kids.
Sure.
Like putting it back on Hitler. Like I'm definitely culpable, right? Like I put Hitler in the room with the Jew and the gun. Like I made it possible for that Jew to die. That guilt's on me. But Hitler also made the choice to shoot the Jew.
Yeah.
The guilt's on him too. So he still had the free will. Like he still could have. And this is kind of the big argument. Like, could Hitler choose not to shoot the Jew just because he can? And that goes into kind of okay, the history of philosophy, right? Like they've been arguing about this since ancient Greece and before. Like if there's the argument of determinism and necessity, and the idea of like what, like the ancient Greek the people who discovered cosmology, right? The people who discovered that natural laws govern the world. They're like, well, wait a minute. If this is caused by that, like if I hit something and it's going to go this far because that's how it has to do it, does that mean that we have any free will, or is it all deterministic? And Aristotle, he kind of found like a loophole. He said, well, some things are chance, and that's where we have our free will, is like in this element of chance. And so they kind of argue about this for a long time, right? And all the way up to Kant, like they've been arguing whether or not we can do this. And what a lot of people ended up doing was creating this kind of dualism, right? They said, okay, everything is physically determined, but our minds are not physical, therefore we still have free will.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you see this coming up with not only in like Western thought, but you see it with like Augustine and the problem of evil, with like he's saying, he's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like if God is all-knowing and God is all-powerful, then do we have any free will? Or is like, is the Holocaust kind of God's fault in a way? And then there's, Islam had this kind of Sunni Shia divide. Part of that was about like, the Sunnis were very determinists, and the Shiites were more inclined towards like personal freedom. Like, if it's God's will, then that's going to happen. They're like, no, we have a choice in it. Buddhism is actually they don't have like an omniscient God, right? That presents a whole bunch of paradoxes. Having an omniscient God, that presents a whole bunch of problems. That's what Western philosophy has been arguing about forever. Was it like, how do you have an omniscient God and still have free will? It's like what you're saying with the Garden of Eden. Buddhism doesn't have that, but they have karma. And this one's interesting because it kind of relates to psychology, right? Like, what's the biggest predictor of present behavior?
Yeah, past behavior.
And that's kind of what karma is. It says like your character and values that shape your behavior, but you inherited those from a past life, right? So like it's just like a series of bad habits over and over again, and you can always change them by acts of will. And so I don't think that, like, even today, like, it seems like philosophers are still arguing about this idea of free will as more information comes in, like quantum theory and, like statistics and chance.
Yeah.
So I think a better thing to ask instead of philosophy or religion would be science. Like, what does science say about the subject of free will?
Oh, there's a couple things. First of all, Paul Meehl is a guy who's a statistician, right? He was a mathematician who was, by chance also a psychology guy. I don't remember if he was a psychologist experimental or psychologist practicing. I think he was practicing and also experimental. Not sure. Anyway, he was really big into, like I said, math. He became interested in this thing called actuarial models. Actuarial models versus like clinical judgment. Because like what happens, clinical judgment, that's a false dichotomy, really, saying that like we don't use statistics to inform our decisions. But at the time they weren't. This was like in the 50s, I think, or 60s. So what would happen is, you get someone in your room, they walk in, and this is like what most counselors and social workers do. You just get a sense of the guy, right? So you say something like, hey, so the person comes in and says like, hey, I'm not a bad person. I didn't mean to kill someone, and the court's waiting on your decision. They say, did he mean it or not, right? Or he says like, oh, I lost my mind in the situation. Right, and back then they didn't know anything about losing your mind or insanity, so they would say things like, well, tell me about that. And they would use like kind of the sixth sense, like gather a bunch of information and then do like a generalized feeling, like, I feel like he's like this. I feel like he's not lying, or I feel like he is. So as you might predict, the chance that that might go wrong is, pretty high. So, pretty high in general, I guess. But so this guy came along and he said, can we do things better? So he ended up taking statistical techniques to, guess about if someone will be violent in the future or if they're lying or things like that. And he caused a huge revolution because he would show multiple times that actuarial models, so like things that predict like what you're going to do based on maybe like self-report, but most importantly, your past behavior, was better by far than clinical judgment. So he started saying things like, maybe that should be the intake. When we have a client come in or patient come in, we should have them fill out just like yes/nos on a questionnaire that's seemingly unrelated, but they predict this patient's, treatment success or their ability to commit suicide, or their probability of committing suicide in the future, or whatever. So he was arguing for those sorts of things. And as it turns out, we've got some really good models now for that. And we kind of blend the two. We use clinical judgment for the parts we don't know, but we give ourselves a percentage. The actual model now pops out a percentage rather than a yes or a no.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and we use that to inform our decisions because not everyone is going to be statistically average. I mean, I think probably everyone listening knows that. I'm sure everybody's been subject to laws or rules that were for kind of people that couldn't figure out what was right or wrong in a situation, and you were like, oh, geez.
Right.
Like, like insurance, for example. Anyway, so yeah, he said one of those things. But there's this really famous study, and I think we've referenced it here before, by a guy named Benjamin Libet. I'm sure you've heard of it. No? It's the one about the fact that they found that through some neuroscience where they imaged people's brains and asked them to make minute, not very important decisions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what happened?
So this is the one where they would make the decision like milliseconds before they actually consciously make the decision. They'll already kind of have the decision in mind, and then they're like, okay, this is why I'm making this decision.
Yeah, exactly. So as it turns out, these informed decisions, quote unquote, these weren't informed decisions per se. Well, they were in a sense. They were just very simplistic. The person had already made the decision by the time he said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do it or not." Right. So it was pre-conscious in a way.
Yeah.
It was already shooting down that pathway, and it just happens to route through the part of your brain that is responsible for conscious thought, and then we assign a reason afterwards. But we already have the gut feeling why we're going to do that. And that one's been used a lot, like in philosophy and psychology. A lot of people have referenced that, but there's,
that kind of lends credence to the determinism model, right? Like one thing I've noticed with all this philosophy that I was reading is that the way people would find a way for moral agency was by creating a dualism, right? Like the physical matter and the spiritual or the mind are different, and therefore we have agency. But when Isaac Newton his mathematical theories start taking off, and you have people like Leibniz who are like, okay, so everything is just about cause and effect, physical determinism. It's just like the Greeks thought, and less like the medieval theologians. So he said, everything proceeds mathematically. If someone could have a sufficient insight into the inner parts of things, and in addition it had remembrance and intelligence enough to consider all the circumstances and take them into account, he would be a prophet and see the future and the present as in a mirror. So he's saying that if you knew all the stats, you could determine everything that's going to happen, because there's no room for free will in that case.
Yeah, that's actually from a Daniel Dennett argument that he talked. I remember reading this in philosophy, and he was, I think it was, what was this? Philosophy of the Mind, I think. One of the courses, but he was talking about. He said, so let's say I don't know someone from Adam, right? Someone on the train station is next to me, and they say something. They lean over, and they open their mouth, and they're about to say something. I have no clue what this person is about to say, none whatsoever. It could be, did you see the football match last night? He's a Scottish guy. That kind of thing. Is it about the weather? Is he going to ask me about my hat? I don't know. I have no idea. I could not make an informed decision. Now, if this was my best friend, who I know very well, we spend a lot of all the summers together, and he made this long case about how he knows his buddy really well. He can call him at any time of day, and he knows where his friend's going to be, almost with very little error. Well, he was saying if he leaned over to me and I was looking around the environment and I saw I could infer pretty quickly if he's like, hey, and he taps me, I have some idea, at least narrowing it down to maybe 5 topics of interest. One, I know that he likes I know that he likes cricket. So and I look outside and I see there's a cricket match going on. Bam, so that's one possibility. Very strong possibility if he has a history of pointing those out to me, right? So he's saying that and he goes through all the other scenarios. The point is he says, you see how I can restrict down what this person's going to do. So if anything else, we've at most got maybe a tiny bit of flexibility with our quote-unquote freedom of choice, but also our free will. And he says, but I imagine, and this is where the logical argument kicks in, is an inference he made is, okay, so if I knew everything about him and I spent my whole life dedicating and understanding him even better than he understands himself, and I just watched him and collected data and rubbed my chin a lot while I stared at him, I think I could narrow this down to 2. what if there was a place that doesn't that seem to suggest that there's a place where you could narrow it down to one, and you're like, I know exactly what he's going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this and what he did last week and this, he did this. Now, we don't even have that. He says, we don't even have that. We can't even afford that amount of time on ourselves. We can't just sit and think why we do things.
Mm-hmm.
So that could help explain why we don't know why we do certain things. But that was his argument. I found it pretty compelling when I was in philosophy, but I overall rejected it. But
yeah, Kant was very upset by this. He's the guy who wrote a lot in Practical Reason about,
mm-hmm.
and yeah. he took the same cop out that everyone else did. I feel like people get to this point, and this is just me conjecturing. I don't know if this is true, but it seems like philosophers get to a point where they realize that the only way to have free will is to create a dualistic worldview, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kant imagined a world of phenomena and a world of noumena, which is the mind. And Plato did the same thing. He had the idea realm, and the Renaissance and the Scholastics in the Middle Ages, they put God outside of time, so therefore he could their answer to this was God lives in a separate plane outside of time, therefore he can know the future without affecting us in this world inside of time. Or Descartes, he broke everything down to the mind and the body being two different things. So Kant does the same thing, right? He creates this mind world and real world, and he puts all the rational belief in freedom and God. He lets it all exist because those are things of the mind and therefore not affected by physical determinism. But I feel
right.
all this mind-body dualism is kind of just us rebelling against the idea that we're just kind of bags of meat, like computers made out of organs. And so
right.
we want to cling to this idea of free will, but we don't have any physical evidence for that. All physical evidence points to determinism. And so we are okay, well, there's a separate thing. There's our brain, but there's also our mind. And our mind exists to give us free will. It's this illusion of choice, right? We can still, because you have to exist that way, right? Otherwise, everything breaks down. Morals break down, laws break
right.
down, because how do you punish somebody who didn't have any choice but to shoot everybody?
Right. I don't, first, two things. First, I don't agree with that outcome, because in psychology we know these facts, and we're very well aware of them, and we still support things like prison. Why? I mean, if the person was determined to do it anyway. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But second, I didn't get to add the caveat, which I think almost everyone skips over this Libet article that is super famous, the one about where he measured the time of someone making a decision and when they became consciously aware of it, and they looked at the neural pathways, and as it turns out, people made these decisions before they were consciously aware that the decision even existed, right? Mm-hmm. That one that I just referenced. Well, they didn't mention something of this. So they say, of the 400 milliseconds or whatever it was, I think it was 400 or 500, of total milliseconds before the person made a decision, 250 of that was unconscious, and the person had already made their decision. Well, there's 150 remaining. So what happened there? Well, this whole thing was looking at volition, which is just motivation, right? It's a fancy psychology word for motivation. Well, they're, on their own volition. Well, the volition part, and this actually segues perfectly into the catalyst model. The catalyst model takes these things into account, where what those 150 seconds did is the person could modify what they were going to do when it came to conscious behavior. So what they get is they get an urge to do something, and then this control part of their brain, right, the impulse control, would say yes or no. And not only yes or no, but sometimes you could slightly modify it. Not a lot, but slightly. So that kind of has to do with, remember, the catalyst model is about this behavioral trajectory. We get an impulse to be violent or whatever, and 5 outcomes come. One where I swing hard, one where I swing, soft, or one where I just shove the guy or something, but of those 5, that's a very restricted choice pattern, right? Or choice outcome. So yes, you have some control, but only that small amount, you see? So that idea of the catalyst model, which is what the catalyst model predicts and says, that idea is actually supported by this, because it's saying oh yeah, you have these urges and you've already made your decision as it starts coming through, but you haven't started your motor function yet, which means you haven't started pulling back to hit the guy or whatever it is you're going to do. I think the task had to do with moving a finger, but you haven't actually done that yet. You've still got 150 seconds or milliseconds before it does. And in that 150 milliseconds, you could restrict your behavior or choose out of one of these very small amounts of choices. Or it doesn't say that, but that's suggested. What it does say is that you were able to either restrict by inhibiting it, say don't do that, or go ahead and do that. Or we could, in that 150 seconds, slightly modify the behavior. I'm going to push forward and push this button. Wait, no, I'll push to the side and actually hit the plastic casing on the right, or whatever, right? So we could actually control, minutely, what our outcome was. So pretty cool.
So are you saying that like the libertarian model of free will, where you still have some choice in the matter. Like there's still a way of having free will and choosing the right. Like you say that we still have that, or is even that mechanism, like the ability to control it, is that kind of determined by like the hardware you're running in your brain?
Yeah. Well, it's saying that. I mean, this one, for example, this study seems to suggest that like widely, generally speaking, we all have this, and yeah, I'd imagine there's some variance, but with this, we are hardwired, it looks like, within a couple milliseconds of how much time we have to decide between those things, but I think the hardwiring part comes with this, that the direction of action before your volition point kicks in. So like, all I mean is like, violence, for example. I'm going to punch this guy in the face, and that's kind of the one of the 5 trajectories coming out of things I can do, or it's the main push. I'm gonna punch this guy. Well, 150 milliseconds afterwards is like you saying yes or no, and I think that's shaped by your learning history. So like that would be psychology. So like whether I completely restrict my punch, right? Like I have the urge and I don't do it. That would probably have to do with learning history, and the portion of the brain, obviously the impulse control device, which is the last possible stop of like you're gonna do it, which is like oh god, I was gonna do it. I balled up my fist, but I didn't. The psychology part says, do I even ball up my fist? Have I see the hardwire thing is kind of it's a misnomer because your brain changes. So
right,
over
but like up to this point, like your learning history, like I'm still looking at the question of free will. Like let's say you raise Elijah to be like a really good kid, and then he's a really good kid. Like is that like does he have the choice in the matter? Like could he have been a bad kid with a different learning?
So I'm glad you brought this up because this actually brings back to where the conversation went with my Garden of Eden thing. Is I said yeah, so he did that, and they said, well, okay, but how can then you're just saying that like God makes a world where He crafts the environment so that we do it perfectly, right? Like, and then first of all, I'm like, well, yeah, but second of all, no, okay, maybe not. Maybe you can give some small choice, but it would be this illusion of choice, like we're talking about, right? Illusion of choice comes about whenever, like what I said was, okay, so like I presume that in the garden they had many things to eat, right?
Sure.
Many fruits, many vegetables, probably not other animals, but stuff like that.
Just like fruits and veggies, why not?
Yeah, well, there's at least maybe a small choice. Like I can have 2. I can have an orange or a banana. Well, let's say, but I imagine there's more. Let's say there's 5 kinds of fruit, and that's it. That's the only thing they can eat. Well, they've got that, and then they're saying that to have free choice, you need to also have the one that's going to damn you in all eternity as well. It's not really true. That's like me saying to my kid, like, well, I've got to give him free choice. I put the butcher knife out in front of him, and then I put his toys. I don't need the butcher knife. Take that away. Like, that I give him the illusion of choice by saying things, and I do this as a parent a lot. Oh, and this is a good one. If you have kids, absolutely do this. You get that sense of agency, and the person. Okay, so the way when we make a decision, afterwards we justify that decision and we become comfortable with it, right? And we make reasons of why we did it. That happens with kids too. Like you're more comfortable with the decision you feel that you made. So what I do is I give them illusion of choice. I say, Elijah or Davian. Okay, so you've got a decision here. You can either go clean your room, or like right now, or you can clean it in 5 minutes. Do you want to clean it right now or 5 minutes? And I know damn well sure that they're probably going to say 5 minutes. But then they're like, 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay. And really, like most parents would just walk in and say 5 minutes, and turn that off. And I've done that too. But it's better if you allow them to make the decision.
Right.
Because of the confirmation
5 minutes comes up, they're like, this is the one I chose. This is the better decision.
Yeah, exactly. Because our brain, we don't search for alternatives unless we do a different. I'll talk about that later, how we make decisions. But we don't search for alternatives. We don't find ways that it could not be true near as quickly or near as well as we do think of ways it can be true. So when I give him that choice, he thinks, yeah, that's the choices. He doesn't really think, wait, are there others? We're not good at that unless we train that. So give that illusion of choice, and that's what I would do here in the Garden of Eden. I would say, here's your 5 choices. That, because it's still an informed decision. You say, this one's better for you, this one's worse for you. Not this one here's a butcher knife and it's going to kill all of humanity for the rest of existence. Oh, by the way, I'm going to flood him after that too, just because I'm super pissed.
It's interesting. Like I still don't know where I stand on this because on the one hand, like I'm a monist, right? Like I don't think there's a dual world. Like I think that's just a cop out to be like, oh, there's this world we have no evidence for, so therefore that's how we can explain things. It's kind of like saying because magic,
Yeah, right.
So I'm a monist, and I think there's only physicality. And then it's like, well, then everything I do is related to like how my brain is, what my learning history is, like how good my impulse control is. Like a lot of it, these are things I can't control, right? Like I didn't come through and like design my own brain.
Right. Well, you did by every choice you make. I mean, granted, those aren't necessarily, but you have a range of 5 choices.
Right,
You know,
but like, do I have any freedom in those five choices? Am I kind of
yeah,
predetermined to make a choice because of the way my neurons are? Like, there's no like overriding. Like, there's no. It's not like me behind a computer, right? Like
right.
giving input and giving output. It's just my brain is a computer. Like I am a computer.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. Like, so it'd be a computer program like this. First of one, a computer program that changes by every. Let's say it lets you do A, B, C, or D, and
Hmm.
it says A, B, C, or D. Which one do you want to do? And it's quick. It's like quick, quick, decide. And then you go, okay, B. And let's say it's an informed decision. Like, what do you want to eat for dinner? And you say, B, steak or whatever. And you click it as fast as you can. Well, it takes that and puts it back in its memory store, and then that changes the five ones next time, right? You still
Hmm.
only get five decisions because our brains not our brains. I'm saying that weird. Well, I mean, yeah, it's our brains. Our brains are both informed by and inform our decisions. So,
Right.
like,
But
yes, of course, it's a two-way. But also, those five it gives out, that's what it means by behavioral trajectories. Like, the things that, from the catalyst model, the five things, options that I have that I can slow kind of, like pick one or the other, it's a tight shot group, as we say in the military, which means, like, when you shoot at shoot at a target and it's got, like, they're real close together.
mhm.
So it's a tight shot group of behavioral trajectories, things I am pushed to do by my hardwiring, if you could put it that way. I don't like hardwiring,
Well, not
but
even hardwiring, but just like the way your
propensity.
neurons are and the way your history is, like the way your brain is shaped to that moment determines the choice it's going to make from the to the next moment.
Maybe, yeah, but then we've got the 150 seconds of volition, or in the catalyst model, it says like your impulse control device,
Yeah, but
your
what
little
is that
part.
volition? Like, what does that come from?
You mean like how you choose which one of those five?
Yeah.
Well, I think that has to do with learning history, and then also the fact that I think there's a lot coming into play there. But it could definitely be that if I could be replicated by a computer,
Hmm.
like so possibly deterministic. But I think that there's a part of us that mm, it's the consciousness or not the consciousness, the I mean I guess
Yeah.
consciousness and reasoning, right? Of where we say, all right, so I'm gonna make this decision
Hmm.
out of these few that I've got a choice of,
Hmm.
right?
But there's got to be an algorithm that makes you choose that one. Like,
Right.
if you're a dualist, it's easy, right? Like your spirit makes that decision or whatever, right? Like your soul.
Sure.
But if you don't believe in that thing, if you're just if you're just like let's say computer AI gets to the point where it can function as well as a human brain.
Mhm.
Like, do they suddenly have free will at that point, or is it just that they are at
Oh
the
yeah.
same place that we're at?
Okay. Yeah, I definitely believe. I mean, definitely. So far, yeah, I don't think dualism is, and maybe you feel the same way, but I don't think dualism is necessarily impossible, and I don't scoff at people who believe that way. I
Hmm.
just don't. I definitely believe in monism too. So yeah, I think that mm, let's see, our decisions, like I think science is consistent with this too, is that our decisions are like if because I hate this term. If I were him, I would have done this,
Right. No.
right? Because I do
If,
believe that
yeah, I
determinism
feel
comes
like
into
if
play
I
there.
were him, I would have made the same decision he made. Like if I had the exact same history as the guy who shot all those people like a few weeks ago. Like if I
Right.
had his brain and I was like that person at that time, I think I would have done the same thing.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, okay, in that sense, yes. Like,
And so then do we have free will, or are we kind of slaves to our A, learning history, and B, brains? Like
I
we
mean, I
say our
guess so.
choices determine our learning history, but how much choice do we have in making the choices is what I'm wondering.
I don't know. Like, in the end, yes, I always err on the side of determinism. Like, I just say, oh, well, that person is, and that helps me both actuarially, so statistically, for
Hmm.
whenever I run numbers on people, but also for clinically, because then it helps me empathize with anyone, right? Because if you believe in a free will and you think you would have done it differently if you were him, you could be vindictive dickhead. But if,
Hmm.
if not, if you believe in determinism, you're like, no, what he's doing perfectly makes sense. And I have yet to be proven wrong with this, personally, anecdotally in my own practice, like when I practice, I have yet to find someone's behavior that I can't make sense of.
Right.
Like, because I'm like, well, tell me about that. Why'd you do that? And they're like, well, I mean, I'm a bad person. I'm like, well, why? I mean, like, what pushed you towards it then? I mean, you had a choice to do this, and you had a choice to expose yourself to people. Why did you choose exposing? Well, I mean, I don't know, I just have these urges. Huh, tell me about those. And then once you really connect with all those pieces, all of a sudden you're like, well, here, of course you're going to go, doing these horrible things to people. You know, you got these urges and you couldn't do it this healthy way. And
yeah, the fact that you can actually alter behavior by like knowing what to change in somebody, like it kind of like it's less a matter of free will and more a matter of like you're changing his his rewards and his behavior models of psychology.
Right.
Like it's almost like reprogramming a pigeon, right? Like how much free will does a pigeon have? Like you can kind of make it do whatever you want, or a kid, right? Like you can kind of make the kid do whatever you want because you know how to like alter variables that would change how he makes decisions.
Sure, yeah. It's almost like a free will of the gap, and I say this a lot with personality. You know, like when you say God to the gap argument, basically that means like as science figures out more and more about us and the world, you just insert God into places you don't understand. That's like a criticism that
It's
some
like
atheists
an
have.
ever-shrinking field of ignorance, basically.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the same way with psychology. Like the more people know, like about their kids and why their kids are behaving that way, the less they blame the kid, you know, and quote unquote personality, and just can't change that. All those mysterious things that you just sweep under the rug. The more you understand, you're like, oh shit, okay, yeah, I'm definitely causing that. Like I should probably change how I engage them. You know, like yelling at someone because like escalation of violence, for example. That bugs me, but I won't get into too much of it. But the way that works is that let's say I'm to you or a child, but you know, I'll use you because this isn't just children. Like I say, like we start arguing about something, and you say, and this isn't just micro, escalation. I mean just overall. You leave that argument feeling a little slighted, right? Well, do you feel particularly warm to me, or do you feel kind of a little cold to me?
I feel cold to you.
Yeah, and I'm using like weird words here. I understand, but we can all empathize with these words. So, let's say I insult you right after that. In both scenarios, whether I was kind or I was bad, right? Or I was kind to you or I was mean to you. And if I was mean to you, how much would it hurt you? Versus if I was kind to you, how much would it hurt you if I followed up with an insult?
So the insult would probably hurt more often if I didn't have a past history of you being a dick. So,
right?
I value your opinion more.
Yeah, and so that's what happens with parents or with people a lot. Like marriages, this happens a lot, where the people just become cold and they say horrible things to each other because they've escalated so much, and that they're they don't see a response in their mate or their child unless they spank them, or their mate they yell at them or say horrible things,
or spank them.
Or spanked them, yeah. So over time, that's escalated, and that my whole job, marital therapy at least, and in working with kids, is to de-escalate that. Say like, no, stop. I want you to say this to him or her. Like, I want you to say this to him, or I want you to say this to her. Say this. You've hurt me, or I'm scared. Whatever. Just whatever you're feeling, core. Not the protective stuff that you added on afterwards, which is like, you idiot, you never listen when I do this, right? Really, what is it? You're scared, right? You're scared that he's cheating on you or whatever. Say I'm scared and just see what he says. And then she says I'm scared, and he says I don't care. I'm like, stop. Wrong. Like that. See how you've escalated. Why don't you care? Well, because she said this to me. So say I'm hurt too. Say that. Okay. I'm hurt too. Now you've got someone who's scared and someone who's hurt, not someone who's hurling insults at each other, right? So my job is to break those past learning histories down of like swinging the bat, and whenever that doesn't work, you swing harder. Same thing with kids.
Yeah.
So with this, how do they work in the learning history? Well, essentially learning history here too. I mean, I was talking about the personality of the gaps and the free will of the gaps.
Right. Yeah. I feel the same way. I think that's a good analogy. Like free will like becomes an ever shrinking place of knowledge as we learn more about how the brain works. Like I feel so I'm on board with prison sentences and stuff. Like I'm not really a fan of the death sentence because again, like how much choice did that guy have? But he does need to be isolated away from the rest of society for our safety, right?
Yeah, I think I'm not against the death sentence for like people who have like maybe raped children or things like that, just because maybe there's no saving that guy. If his behavioral trajectory is so far to that realm that pulling him back will take years of remodification through empirically supported treatments. I mean, it's worth a shot. Everyone's worth a shot, but
I just think that but free will, probably an illusion, but we have to kind of function as a society as if it's not, because in order for behaviorism to work, there have to be consequences. And so we can actually improve behavior this way, and then we just have it's like a D&D game, right? Like we have to have the PCs think they have the choice for everything to work, but sometimes we have to make it an illusion of choice.
But do we? Because so I know everything you just said. And you know everything you just said, but I still tell parents to punish their kids, and And well, I am perfectly informed that this is how it works, but I still believe that I punish myself. In other words, like let's say I um, eat something horrible before I was going to go on a run, and I was like, oh shoot. Okay, well now I see it more as like a puzzle, and I'm like, okay, so now I need to increase the amount of time I run so that it's more punishing, and like do some sprints or something, so
Right.
that it's more punishing on myself, and then I'll less likely do in the future. So then I make an informed decision rather than say something like, oh man, I need to make free will, or I need to adjust my choices next time so that make a better decision, that kind of thing. I'm like, well, you can want it all you want, but you're not going to. You have to set yourself up for success here. So I think
Right.
if everyone did know about psychology, then we wouldn't have to. But I see that in today's society, maybe that is a useful delusion.
Yeah, I think at least for like if everybody was a DM, everybody would be a better player character because they know what's going on behind the scenes
Right.
and they know like all the work that's going into it and they know like how to make the game better. But not everyone's a DM, not everyone's a psychologist. I think it, free will is a useful lie at this point because people have this innate sense of justice, right? Like we have to feel like what we're doing is like justified and that punishments are justified. And punishments shape behavior. Um, Even though like technically like if a dog pees on me because he's never learned not to pee on me, like it's not really the dog's fault. And if a guy like if a kid has bad parents and he's a bad kid, like we still punish the kid. We don't go and punish the parents. But is it really the kid's
Mhm.
fault?
I don't punish them. That's the difference. Like I don't believe that that would do any good. I mean, I also punish the kid. I say something, but
Right.
I
Well, you have to
distribute my
punish the kid in
punishment like
order to change
this.
his behavior, right? Like that's part of behaviorism is like not rewarding that kind of behavior.
Well, yes, and okay, so that would be like Mike, what they call it molar, but like
Uh,
large scale. So I would try my best intervention, my best one would be to fix the system. So
mm,
that's why it's so helpful to talk to parents. Like if I could do that on a legal scale, if I could just go to like the judge of a town and be like, hey, your town's out of control, do this, I would do that. But
mm,
like for the kid, like I just gently redirect the kid, like because we get some, I'm sure you can imagine, we get some obnoxious kids. We test kids for like ADD and
mm,
or oppositional defiance. So like I generally tell them, like hey, that's not acceptable. So I'm not escalating, right? I'm actually de-escalating, and
mm,
he ignores me, of course. He's like, whatever, throw stuff, and then I also go talk to the parents. I say, hey, here's how to adjust that behavior, and then I show them. But I don't know. So I guess both, but I do punish the parents because I see it as a systemic problem. I think everyone would be useful to this, and we've said this on the show a couple times. But the rat is always right. If we just
mm.
believe that, then you kind of get stuck into determinism, and that leads you to helpful behavior, which is adjusting how you engage someone rather than trying to adjust that person. You know,
Right.
like in a conversation or anything. Like if the person's out of control, well, you can't change him, so the rat is always right. He's doing what his environment sculpted him to do. Oh, I'm part of his environment. I can have a small effect on that. I'll try. Rather than get mad. Like, I get on internet debates and people are like, you're a saint. They send me messages and stuff, and I'm like, well, I guess. I mean, I think it's just the only decision you can make if you're informed psychologically.
Yeah, it's the only decision you can make. It's just yeah, it's interesting this idea of like fate versus free will versus determinism because philosophers have been arguing about it a long time. Like science is kind of like going both ways from it. From what I've gotten from you, like there's this like room, there's like that zero point 0.2 milliseconds of room where there's some kind of volition, but where does that volition come from? Like it's interesting
Right.
when you think about like responsibility, about guilt, and about innocence, right? Because
Right.
in the end, we still live in a world of guilt and innocence. We still live in a world where we feel like Jean Valjean's justified in stealing a loaf of bread and Javert's being a dick for pursuing the law. Like we make these moral judgments, but in reality, like if we look at the science, like Jean Valjean had no choice but to steal that loaf of bread, and Javert had no choice but to pursue the law because of their, Victor Hugo was actually really careful with the way he wrote his characters' backstories. Like he would go into Javert's backstory and like show you his childhood and show you like a lot of the romanticists were kind of realists in this sense, and that they would go through and they would carefully flesh out everything that led those characters up to those choices, so it was almost inevitable that they would act the way they do.
That's good.
So it's interesting because we feel this sense of moral superiority, right? Like I'm a good person, I'm a good person. I know psychology. I do this. I do that. I'm a saint online, but in reality, you're a good person because of a lot of things that were out of your control, right?
Well, absolutely.
And that's kind of like I guess it's something just to keep in mind is like don't feel superior to people who are quote unquote evil because that's kind of they're as trapped by their natures as you are.
Right. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think the thing is like once you become informed about these things and then you read the research and stuff, there's not much wiggle room. Like if anything, argue for like 20% of the variance is quote unquote free will, but
Mm.
still 80%, I'd bet on those odds all day. So
Yeah.
like what you do is you become just a better person. I feel like, or at least a more, I wouldn't say better. I want to get away from that whole
Get away from
up and
good
down
people.
idea. Yeah, but you become a more approachable person, and for me, that's been very helpful. I was a vindictive dick when I got into psychology, like the
Mm.
program. I was right, wrong. I was a moral positivist, like
Mm.
all of that, and that's all changed within like a couple years. Because now I'm like, oh wait, yeah, that's not consistent with science. I can't say that anymore.
Right. And then like I don't know, it's really interesting the way you like when Osama bin Laden died, like my first impulse was like everyone else is like, good, that guy's an asshole. You know, we
Yeah,
got him. But then like my second impulse was like, wait, am I justified in feeling that way? And then I was like, okay, I think it's still justified to be happy that he's dead because he was such a danger to society, you know? It's the same reason
right.
we incarcerate people. Like they may not be responsible, quote unquote, like morally responsible for their behavior, but they still need to be taken away from the rest of us for safety.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm still happy he's dead, but I don't feel vindictive towards him anymore. I just feel like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
shame that he was a broken, basically broken person, and now at
Well,
least he's gone.
and that's so helpful. Like that's a good example. And what is it? What happens? How do we start making decisions? Because people have asked me this, by the way, and I came upon the same problem whenever I had my stray away from religion. Well, how do I make decisions then if it's not right or wrong? So how do you make decisions?
How do I make decisions?
Yeah, if it's not right or wrong, good or
Oh,
bad,
I
good and
make
evil.
decisions based on like how it's gonna make me feel. Like I try and like I
Okay.
know from past learning experiences that when I do pro-social things, when I help people, when I don't harm people, I feel better. Like I just don't feel as bad. I've
Yeah.
evolved a self-correcting mechanism of, I guess, guilt, you could call it.
Yeah.
That whenever I harm somebody, so I've got this kind of consequential calculus in my head, right? I'm a consequentialist. I'll say which is going to cause the least amount of harm, and I try and go with that. And sometimes I don't, and then I feel bad. I'm like, oh, that's why I should have done the other decision.
Hmm. Well, and least amount of harm. Actually, that's not. I would try to, if I was your therapist, and I'm not, I would try to guide you away from that too, because that's called aversive control, which means like you're trying to choose between two bad decisions.
Hmm.
Instead, I would say like, oh, well, what? Because we've got this cool thing of like teleology, right? We can think about things in the future and see them as this like causal
Hmm.
line, right? We can look forward and do that. Well, because of that, that's a really cool advantage as a species, I think. I mean, or at least it's really useful. So what I
Right.
like to do is I like to say, like, oh, so that allows us to set up goals, right? And we don't. And I don't think you were saying this, but some people assume that this is the only way to make decisions once you're done is consequentialist of like hedonic calculus, which is like, will this make me happy or not? Yes or no?
Hmm.
And how much and how little. But instead,
Hmm.
you can say you could definitely make decisions like that, but you can also say, all right, so this was going to make me miserable, like getting up and running, but a kind of person I want to be here in the future is, oh, I'd like to be very healthy. I see myself in 20 years as being, healthy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, I calculate that in though. Like I wouldn't be like, oh, what's gonna make me miserable right now versus what's gonna make me miserable like in the long term. Like
mhm.
when I make decisions, I try and think about like in the long term, what's gonna be best for me as far as causing me the most amount of good while causing the least amount of harm to others. It's just complicated equation of like, yeah, it would cause me more good to do this, but it would cause more harm to other people, so I'm not gonna do it. Like it's not merely aversive or merely in the moment. It's a complex thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with like good or evil. It's just about like basically my learning behavior, like how I felt in the past when I've done things, and how I want to avoid that feeling and pursue behaviors that make me feel good.
Yeah, and okay, so this is the reason why I didn't think that you thought like that. I challenge it because I'm trying to adjust our language here, and I think the coolest language to use, I think, or the most helpful for me, well, I just did it, is to say helpful. Or
Mm-hmm.
helpful doesn't mean good, it just means helpful for what? Because that you should always ask what the predicate is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Helpful for who? Helpful for how? How is this helpful? Helpful, implies a goal. Good, bad, and evil don't. They just presume this behavior is good in and of itself no matter what, right? Which isn't true. I mean, there are some that are kind of like that, but anytime someone comes up with an example, I'm like, give me an example of that, because you might imagine I talk to a lot of religious people here in
Mm-hmm.
this setting,
In
and
Mississippi.
yeah, yeah, and they're stuck on this idea, and I'm like, okay, so give me an example, and they're like, well, helping others. I'm like, all right, so tell me about that. Helping others. I say, just give me any scenario. This is the best part. You could say anything, and I'm still gonna win. So go ahead. And they're like, helping someone who has no food, giving them food. And I was like, always good? I say, yeah. And I go, okay, so you have no food and your kids are starving. give them food, do it. Good, good. It's good, do it. And they're like, well, I don't have any food. I'm like, okay. So I was like, okay, so maybe if I have food, and my kids aren't starving, and I'm like, so you're already starting to add things on. So that's not good per se. It's just good in some scenarios. Okay, well, then good starts shrinking down too, kind of a good of the gaps. So pretty soon we just say, all right, I want to be this person for whatever reason. I feel that this is the person I want to be. This helps me get me towards that goal, like running. It's not gonna make me feel good right now. I'm gonna feel like shit, but it puts me closer to the person I want to be. That will, in the end, make me feel better. So I use things like workability and helpfulness, and I found it's really helpful for me to say those things because people can grasp onto those, and they can drop things like my husband or my kid is being bad. Sometimes I do say that bad, but that's a general term, and I hold it lightly. Or like my husband's just doing this, and it's wrong. He doesn't see he's wrong, and I'm like, okay, wrong. What do you mean? Well, wrong because it hurts my feelings. Okay, just say that. Just say that hurts my feelings. And if he doesn't respond, he's a dick. Like, he's not. I understand why he's responding this way, but he needs to understand that should be, for him, it is most helpful for him to be in a happy relationship. To be in a happy relationship, you are required to respond to her whenever she says I'm hurt, even if you're hurt too. So instead of right and wrong, it pulls them away because I find most arguments both people think they're right, right? It does no good to say you're wrong or I'm right. And even in the end, if you both find that it's helpful and you agree, that's still less stinging than being like, yes, you were wrong. Then it's like, oh, well, no, my idea of what was helpful, you're right. This would be more helpful. In that sense, you were right in the sense that we agree on the terms. So anyway, I think I am crusading here, and it sounds like you are too. Because of that, I think this is really harmful ways to speak.
Harmful or not helpful for the result we want?
Well, yeah, that's true, yeah, but I also mean actively harmful because two people who are actively happy can become miserable very quickly by focusing on these terms.
That's why I use harm in my calculus, because I do want to avoid harm, and there are things that are actually harmful, not just not helpful.
Yeah. Well, I say that because that's just psychology. Like the way it works, it's a little tricky.
You're using psychology vocabulary, and I'm coming at it from like an ethical, philosophical vocabulary. But we're saying the same thing.
I'm like the happiest I've ever been in my life, and things are horrible right now. But the reason, I'm living in Mississippi, I'm going to graduate school, I'm failing in like lots of different parts.
Weird infections on your legs, your wife's dying of strep throat.
Yeah, but I'm super happy. That's because I understand psychology now, and I'm very satisfied with life. Like I was like straight up suicidal like a couple of years ago. Like not in the sense of I was actually gonna take my life, but I was miserable, and I was in better situation then than I am now because it's these little tricks you can do to your brain and everything else, and just reformulating the way you think of things. So that's, obviously therapy works, or I wouldn't be doing it, but I did it on myself. So I'm just trying to impart that to everyone that's listening.
Sure.
Is if you just keep listening to this, I can almost guarantee you'll be happier if you at least practice some of these things I'm suggesting. You don't have to, but maybe the ones that sound like approachable, try those. But overall, it has a good effect. Empirically supported, bitches.
It does. So that's free. Do you have anything else to say about free will, or about choice, or about the illusion of choice in games?
Yeah, okay. There's obviously one of them that. So even just talking about choice, like logically, usually pulls up some interesting discussion. But remember Stanley Parable?
Oh yeah.
People like this for that reason.
Right, because it goes way into but do you actually have a choice? Turns out no matter what choice you made, it's going to end this way or that way.
Right.
Yeah. We talked about the Stanley Parable. It seemed basically what we were talking about at the beginning of the in-depth analysis, how sometimes game designers have to make you think you have choice, and they were just kind of lampooning that or shining a light on that
for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
To wink your eye at something is awesome. Lambaste someone with it for 3 hours is absurd.
Yeah, it seemed heavy-handed. I don't really see why people were so blown. People's hair was just blown back by that. They're like, oh my god, that means that there's only certain programmed ways for a game to be. It's like, yeah, that's why it's a game. There's only certain choices that can be made.
Yeah. And Spec Ops: The Line, guys, if you missed the discussion on that, we did an episode, I think. What was that episode even called? I don't remember. But we talked about it.
It was about the games that had deeper meanings.
Yeah, it was the one we talked about Stanley Parable too, but Spec Ops does that very brilliantly and very well because it's doing it on a meta level. It's tricking you rather than just outright telling you. It's
Slapping
something
you in
you,
the face with it.
yeah, it's something you extrapolate from the experience. You're like, oh my God, blank. And that's like the best way to do it, at least in therapy, to get people to understand things. They need to come to the conclusions themselves, and then it has a better stickiness and more applicability. It's more fecund. People are more likely to apply it in many different places.
Right.
So, yeah. But I think, I don't know, are there any other games that do this brilliantly? That's the ones that come to mind. The one.
The free will, are
Yeah.
like whether we have choice or not. Yeah, most of them lots of games have the illusion of choice. Very few games really like drive that home though. Like the fact that you, like most games they'll do like a Mass Effect, right, where it's like you have the illusion of choice, but it's all gonna go back to the same place, or The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a complex. It's something that philosophers have never been able to really straighten out. It's something that science is still like figuring out. It's something that, like I said, my view on it is it's a useful illusion. It's because we've evolved a sense of justice. We have to feel like people are responsible for their actions, just to avoid, I don't know, existential despair.
Right.
But if you were gonna like put a gun to my head and say like, does free will exist? I'd be like, I don't think so. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're all kind of slaves to our meat sacks.
Yeah, exactly. Which, and we have to adjust our language accordingly if we really believe that. Which is, it's tough because I mean, just a couple minutes ago we said, like I was like, how do you make decisions, David? And you proceeded to tell me, which is, you should have been like, I just do what I'm supposed to.
Yeah, I just do what my brain says.
But I think okay, that's the thing. There is a purpose for that though. Like retrospecting, like looking back on things that you've done and then saying, "Oh, I should have done this here," like shooting on yourself, which I warn people not to do. But trying to learn from those experiences is very helpful because then when you do something that you feel that you wanted to do, it's satisfying to our brains. Our brain sacks. We love that crap. And so that's why we say values guided behavior, behavioral activation, things like that. Like it all operates on that principle or operates on that mechanism. So by saying, reinforcing that to ourselves of, yeah, this is something I wanted to do. This is good. I like this. That feels good to us and it's very helpful. And it raises the probability because it's reinforcing, raises the probability we're going to do it in the future. So retrospecting, I don't want to get too much into this, we don't have time, but it's called a effective operation. Man, what's it called? I can't remember the exact term for that. I'm going to shoot myself later because I'm going to be like screaming it at the podcast. But establishing operation, that's it. In behaviorism, it's called establishing operation, which means increasing or decreasing the potency of a reinforcer or a punisher. And so that's really what you're doing when you retrospect. You're not making it more likely. Well, you're making it the magnitude of the reinforcer or the punisher, you're making it higher in the future. So it has effect sitting and retrospecting. Please, continue doing it even if you buy into everything we're saying. But it just realize that, that's all you're doing.
It really kind of deflates the justification for heaven and hell though too when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like the fact that, this is gonna burn, he's gonna be tortured for eternity now because his brain was different than yours, or his learning behavior, his environment, like it basically comes down to like his environment and his brain, right? And it's like, oh well, too bad, you were in a bad environment and your brain wasn't that great, so welcome to hell. Or conversely, like you were awesome, you had a great learning environment, your brain had lots of good impulse control and was able to heuristically see what's going to happen and determine that was a bad choice and that this was a good choice, so welcome to paradise.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't seem fair in that light.
No, it doesn't. You're punching the person's genes and then their learning history. That's not great. But it's helpful in the sense that you are punishing them for it, quite literally. And so you're gonna hopefully it punishes them. Hopefully it brings down the probability they're gonna do it. But if you put them back in the same environment, not so much. One of my professors, Kelly Wilson, he's our behavioral guy. He's like the big dude, one of the big dudes. Well, he did something called Hometown Science, which is a funny name for a class, but that's what he called it. And what he did was he got a bunch of people from rural communities here in Mississippi, which are just the worst of the worst communities. I mean, and I don't mean like the people inside them. I mean, you would not want to grow up there.
Right.
Like, destitute, nobody has shoes.
Your chance for success isn't great if you're growing up there.
You live in a bog, like literally. I'm not kidding. You literally live in a bog. These are gross. I've seen some of them. Well, he took people from there, and then he brought them into the classroom, and how did he do this? Well, all he did was operate on their environment repeatedly. Like he said, here, do these schedules, then do this, and then the level of adherence that they did predicted their success coming out. He didn't once say, you guys should do this. He never said that. All he did was change like their schedule a little bit, did a couple things along the way, and I'm not familiar with this, but he published the results from it, and it was amazing. Because it wasn't about sending them through the jail system, which isn't necessarily going to fix them. Mm. Instead, it was like, oh, I operated on their environment, and now they were forced to do these. It's a whole illusion of choice. They still had some choice, but not purely free will. So anyway, it's just, yeah, I agree. Operating on their environment's clearly the better way to go about it, but I don't know. That's a hard answer. Nobody wants to hear that.
Right. It's easier. I think it's almost like again, like a cop-out. Like, I think it's easier to be like, oh, I do good because I'm good. He does bad because he's bad. Like, it's just you feel more justified than like just saying like, forget those people, throw them into prison, give them the electric chair, whatever. Who cares? Mm-hmm. But when you it's a more difficult truth to accept that things like behavior can be influenced by environment, but it's more helpful to the result of like changing their lives, right?
Right.
Which is why like a lot of people criticize America's prison system because it has such a high not retention. What's the one where you go back into it? There's a word. Basically, a lot of people go back in to the prison system because they don't learn how to function in society. They just basically like their antisocial behaviors get reinforced, right? Like they join gangs to survive. They it's a horrible environment. It's not going to make you a better person per se. It's not going to make your behavior better being in that environment.
Right.
But
I'm taking some heart though because people are starting to get this. I mean, people are operating on environmental variables a lot. Like in prison and stuff, they're offering more reading things. Before they're not gonna read, like in the 50s. And then like people are like, let's put them in there anyway, because as it turns out, we know something about psychology. So then we did, and guess what? It started a little bit, it started a lot, and then they're like, oh, and God forbid someone pass a shank in one of those things, and everybody's like, oh, see, we told you, and I'm like, also, we told you. Yes, they're going to use any tool to be violent. That's obvious. We talked about that with Catalyst model. They're violent people. We get that. That's why they're in jail. So it doesn't matter if you gave them a new food tray. That'd be the new hot thing to hide shivs in. Mm-hmm. But look at their literacy rate. They come out of jail and they can read. Like that's a big deal. F you, man. That's worth. They're gonna shank each other anyway. Like this is just that's what they do in prison. Like the violent ones. Mm-hmm. So, but look at all the people that got helped. I mean, that guy was gonna probably get it no matter what because they had some kind of bad blood. This was just one way they did it. It's the whole content versus processing people are so obsessed with. Like video games too. Jesus.
It's interesting to think about, like as an educator, because I was thinking about how this relates to me as a teacher. You have some kids who are problem kids and some kids who have behavioral problems.
Yeah.
And like the way I'm kind of looking at it now is like we're not responsible for our own actions, but we can be responsible for other people's actions, and that we can influence other people's behaviors. Like somebody's influencing my behavior, like you as a friend, or my parents. Like they influence kind of how I turn out, and I in turn can influence how students turn out better than almost the students can, right?
Right. Yeah.
By changing environment, by changing cues that they get. So it's really interesting. Like there is a responsibility, but it's always passed one step further back, because my behavior is influenced by other people who are influenced by other people, but we're all kind of in it together as a social species. Like we can make it a better world by everyone kind of going along that route.
See, and these conclusions you draw out of us getting rid of these old archaic terms and stuff has already been more helpful. We've just talked about reestablishing the prison system. We've talked about greater predictors for success, and now you're talking about social, cohesion or justice, or just pro-sociality being a desirable factor, something you want to implement in your own life. Just from these things of like dismissing the idea of good and evil per se, like that's just a flimsy descriptor of something that means you want that or you don't want that.
Right. Yeah. It's this Dark Ages like relics that are still in our culture that we can get rid of for more productive terms.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh well. Yeah. So we're solving the world's problems one episode at a time here at the Game Theory Podcast.
Let go of the illusion of free will and then be good anyway.
Yeah, and then go through a little depressive state, because I know I did. Whenever I let go of it, I was like, oh no! Oh! What am I going to do? But then slowly it unfolds. It becomes pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think that's why people keep going back to dualism. Like I was reading all these philosophers, and they all keep finding some way of making things dualistic because it's just easier. I think it just feels better. It's more intuitive.
Yeah, true that. And it allows you to, the last thing I'll say, it allows you to have a conclusion, and that's super important for our brains. We like
Yeah,
that.
we
For
do
us
love
as
that.
humans, we need a resting place so we can say, we're done with that one, and move it aside.
Oh, we got a
Sunny,
mind realm. It's different from the physical realm. Next problem. Next problem.
exactly.
It's
Oh, that guy was evil. Don't worry about it. Don't lose any sleep. Or that person's a good person. They deserved
right.
these good
This is the
things.
best of all possible worlds, as
Yeah,
Moliere would say,
right.
or
But
Voltaire.
good. All right. Well, good. I guess we can move on to our feedback session. Do you want to?
Yeah, let's go to feedback.
All right. This is the feedback section. We got a funny email.
Yeah, we got our first spam bot. Our first spam bot found our account.
Yes.
These are great because they're always just written in really very poor English, and so this one comes from a spam bot. Maybe it's that 13-year-old Ukrainian AI
Maybe.
from the news section.
I
But
believe it.
this one comes from Neolita. It says, "Hi, it's my great pleasure. Please, I want to make friendship with you, to discuss a lot of things with you, and please try to reply me back so that I will tell you all details about me with my photo. If it is God's will, we can move from here. I'll be waiting to hear from you. Yours lovely, Neolita."
Yours lovely.
So riddled with typos and spelling errors, but always fun to hear from a semi-conscious computer program.
Yeah. I'm just glad she wants to make friendship with me to discuss a lot of things with me.
Yes, and if it is God's will, see, we don't have free will. If it's God's will, we can move from here.
I want to make friendship with you to discuss a lot of things with you. I want to. That's what I'm going to say next time I call you, David.
Hey, Jeremiah, what's up? I want to make friendship with you to discuss a lot of things with you. And please try to reply me back.
Hi, it's my great pleasure. Please, I want to make friendship with you. It'll be great.
It's great.
Lovely.
Everyone's gotten these. I'm surprised it took us this long to get our own little spam feedback. So if you want to send us actual mail, give us an email at thegametheorypodcast@gmail.com. Tell us why we are crazy for thinking that we are, for being monists, for example, or whatever. Just give us some questions or feedback or comments. Add to the discussion.
Yeah, or leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Or also check out our Twitter, which is twitter.com/GameTheoryPod. Lots of important, cool stuff going on there. I just say that because I do it and I feel like it's important. Might not be, but it's very interesting. I think I put up that study that I just talked about. That's my last thing I think I did. The one about, or we both talked about, was the neuroscience of free will.
Yeah.
So
we did get a review on Stitcher. I finally figured out how to find the reviews, so
nice.
I've not been paying attention to them. But we do have a review from CJ who says, highly enjoyable and informative. 5 out of 5 stars. This show is a great blend between geekery and intellect. As someone who's interested in games beyond what's hot right now, it's refreshing to hear a pair of intelligent adults talk about games in like fashion, yet stick true to the raw fun that brought us all here to begin with. Well, hopefully we didn't stray too far from the raw fun this episode. It got a little deep.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
But
this one, it's hard. I mean, the episode topic was an abstraction, right? It wasn't just like Batman. It was like free will, you know?
Yeah, it was a little heavy, so we went a little heavy this time. But our next episode is going to be fun. I put a couple of ideas up there. Which one do you think we should cover? Some of them are user suggestions, listener feedback.
Okay, so we want to be thinking about the fact that we are going to be together maybe for the next couple. So after that, so which one do we now want to be together for?
Really, any of those. You want to do tower defense? We can just play some tower defense this week.
What if we? I kind of like the idea of JRPGs. We can keep tower defense in our back pocket.
Okay, JRPGs.
Or we could talk about tower defense, and I could talk about OCD because that's funny.
Yeah, I was thinking there'd be some fun. Really, we could have a fun episode with any of these topics. So, you want to just roll a dice?
Yeah, let's roll a die. We'll roll a die after the thing.
We'll roll a die right now.
You got a die in front of you?
Of course I do. I got a bag of dice right in front of me.
You're living the dream, David.
Living the dream. All right, so here we go. 1 or 2 is tower defense. 3 or 4 is Pokemon. 5 or 6 is JRPGs.
Okay.
4. Pokemon.
All right, Pokemon.
Lots to say about that. This was a listener suggestion on our Facebook group.
I could talk about Pokemon. Got to collect them all and hoarding.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta collect them all, and we could talk about dog fights. There's tons of stuff going on with Pokemon.
Oh yeah, that's true, man. Wow, yeah, this is a good, cool topic. Awesome.
All right, so listener feedback, chosen Pokemon topic will be our next episode.
Awesome. Can't wait. That'll be fun. And maybe we'll be able to talk about Edge of the Empire at some point if we get lucky and schedule a time.
It's getting hard. Everyone's so busy, except me.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, I'm okay anytime, and everyone else has a life. So,
I'm sorry for having a life.
You should look into that.
But
although you don't have a choice.
It's true. But speaking about having a life, we're gonna let you guys get to yours, and we'll see you next week with Pokemon. So, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. This has been one of your hosts, Jeremiah.
And this has been the bag of meat known as David.
You had no decision of saying that.
I had to.
And we'll see you next week with Pokemon.